is significant. It signifies you're seeking more than just sleep. You're seeking a deeper truth, the kind that isn't packaged with external validation, approval, or performance. A truth that resonates within, making you feel at home in your own presence, secure in your own skin, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, truly whole. The teachings you'll hear tonight aren't mere stories. They're invitations, gentle nudges back towards your authentic self. There's no need to blindly believe anything, no pressure to be anything more than you already are. This isn't about becoming better. It's about coming closer, not to someone else's path, but to your own. Because the truth that heals you cannot be borrowed. It must be lived. And this is where that journey begins. There's a phrase found quietly within the early teachings of the Buddha, ahipasiko, one that holds more power than it initially seems. It means, come and see for yourself. No dogma, no forced belief, simply an invitation to explore, to observe, to feel, and to discover for yourself what is real and what is not. It may sound simple, but within that invitation lies the key to true freedom. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught to trust everyone else but ourselves. We were trained to accumulate approval like currency, believing that our value stems from being seen, liked, praised, and meeting someone else's definition of right. But when you live that way for too long, a quiet ache begins to grow within you, the ache of disconnection from your own knowing, from your own heart, from your own truth. This is what ahipasiko dissolves. It invites you to step away from the noise, the filters, the performances, the need to impress, and to turn your attention inward, building a relationship with your own direct experience. Because truth doesn't come from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. When you start living this way, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. You stop seeking permission to feel what you feel. You stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth. You stop giving your power away. This doesn't mean you become cold or aloof. It means you become clear. The kind of clarity that allows you to smile at compliments without clinging to them, to hear criticism without collapsing, and to walk into a room without constantly checking your reflection. This kind of clarity doesn't come from thinking more, it comes from seeing more clearly. And the Buddha's path was always rooted in direct seeing, not memorizing beliefs, not forcing faith, but trusting that your own experience, when met with honesty and awareness, can reveal what is true. It's not always easy, because turning inward means encountering parts of yourself that have been hidden or avoided. The doubt, the fear, the confusion, the feeling of not being enough. But even these, when viewed with gentle curiosity, begin to loosen their grip. That's because they thrive in darkness, in secrecy, in the belief that they times are times you. But they're not. They're just visitors. And ahipasiko invites you to sit with them, not to push them away, not to fix them, but to see them fully, without judgment, without flinching. And something miraculous happens when you do this. You begin to trust yourself, not in an arrogant, look at me, I know everything kind of way, but in a quiet, grounded, steady way. The kind of trust that doesn't need to shout, it simply stands. You begin to realize that wisdom isn't some distant treasure accessible only to enlightened beings. It's already here, inside you, waiting to be uncovered. The Buddha wasn't a god or a magician. He was a human being who paid deep, careful attention, who walked through suffering and didn't run away, who found peace by watching, by listening, by questioning even his own mind. And then he turned to the world and said, "You try, come and see." That invitation remains open to every single person, regardless of your story, your past, your regrets, or your doubts. You don't need to change your life overnight. You don't need to sit under a tree for 7 days. You don't need to memorize any teachings or chant anything in perfect pronunciation. All you need is one thing: the courage to be curious about your own experience. That might mean noticing how it feels when your breath slows down, how it softens your chest, how your thoughts quiet, even if just for a second. It might mean observing the thoughts that tell you you're not lovable and questioning them instead of believing them. It might mean noticing how much tension resides in your body when you try to please everyone and gently asking yourself why. These moments are small, but they're sacred, because each one is a crack in the armor, a chance to touch the part of you that is always whole, even when the rest feels messy. When you begin to live this way, something else starts to dissolve: comparison. You stop measuring your worth against everyone else's highlight reel. You stop chasing happiness as if it's out there somewhere, waiting to be earned. Instead, you start to taste life as it is. You start to trust that your experience, even the difficult parts, is meaningful, that your insight matters, and that your healing doesn't need to resemble anyone else's. That kind of inner freedom changes everything. You begin to move through the world with more authenticity. You say yes and no with more confidence. You stop waiting for everyone else to agree with you before you believe in yourself. Not because you've become stubborn or closed off, but because you're no longer guessing at who you are. You're experiencing it directly, moment by moment. And this is where the real power of Ahipasiko shines, because it doesn't give you answers. It gives you access. Access to the deepest parts of yourself, not just the pretty ones, but the parts that are confused, the parts that are healing, and the parts that long for love but are afraid to ask for it. All of it becomes part of the path. Nothing is wasted. There is no experience that can't be learned from when you're willing to stay present with it. There is no emotion that can't be softened by awareness. There is no story so old that it can't be rewritten by presence. And the best part is, no one can do this for you, and no one can take it away. When your peace comes from your own seeing, it's yours. Not borrowed, not fragile, but deeply rooted. That doesn't mean you'll never struggle. It means you'll have a way to meet your struggle, one that's grounded in compassion instead of shame, and curiosity instead of control. This is what it means to walk the path, not just read about it, not just think about it, but to live it gently, honestly, moment by moment. And in doing so, you begin to feel something rare in this world: sovereignty. You become the author of your inner life. You stop outsourcing your truth. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop waiting for perfect conditions before allowing yourself to feel peace. You start offering that peace to yourself times now asterisk, in this moment, as you are. There's no enlightenment in pretending. There's no wisdom in pretending, and there's no love in pretending. What the Buddha taught, what every awakened being teaches in their own way, is that the path back to yourself is through honesty, radical, loving honesty. And the only way to get there is to look, to listen, to turn inward, to come and see. Not because someone told you to, but because somewhere inside you know there's more. More than the roles you've played, more than the masks you've worn, more than the fears you've obeyed. Beneath all of it, there's clarity. And that clarity doesn't need to shout, doesn't need applause, doesn't need to win or be right or impress anyone. It's simply times is asterisk, quiet, steady, luminous. You don't have to earn it, you just have to uncover it. And every time you meet yourself without judgment, every time you pause and listen, you come closer, not to an idea of perfection, but to the truth of your own being. That's what Ahipasiko really means. Not come and believe, but come and times know asterisk, come and times feel asterisk, come and times remember asterisk. This is not philosophy for the intellect, it's nourishment for the soul. You are not broken, you are not behind, you are not late, you are right on time, and the invitation is here. Let it echo softly in your heart as you drift gently into rest. Come and see, come and see, come and be. And so you begin to sense it. The stillness, the subtle strength of seeing clearly. You've stepped out of performance and into presence. You no longer chase approval like air. You've tasted what it means to trust yourself, not in theory, but in experience. But even in that clarity, something deeper stirs. Not everything within you feels soft. Not every corner feels peaceful, because in the quiet, you begin to notice what's been buried. There are parts of you still aching, parts carrying stories too heavy to carry alone, thoughts you try to silence, feelings you've been told to outgrow, shame that creeps in without warning, guilt that won't let go, and fear that whispers, "You're still not enough." These aren't mistakes in your path. They are times the path. The light doesn't just illuminate what you times want times to see, it reveals what you've tried to forget. And this is where the real work begins. Not through force or fixing, but through times meta asterisk, loving kindness. Not the surface level kind, not the smile on your face, everything's fine kind, but the kind that reaches into the shadows and says, even this belongs. Even you times belong. A love that doesn't skip over pain, but includes it. Not to drown in it, but to free it. This is meta times, for the parts of you you've been at war with. Not to change them, but to hold them close. Because love isn't earned by being flawless. It's revealed by being fully met. Loving kindness, meditation, or meta bhavana asterisk, is not a technique meant to make you feel peaceful all the time. It's a practice of opening, even when it's uncomfortable, asterisk, especially times then. It begins with extending goodwill toward yourself, but not just the part that smiles and achieves, also the part that cries at night, that gets it wrong, that snaps when it's scared, that feels lost in rooms full of people, that regrets the past and fears the future. To meet those parts with kindness is to begin the most radical healing. The process doesn't start by forcing positive thoughts. It begins with telling the truth, that you're tired of running from yourself, that you're done editing your humanity to be more lovable, that you are ready to sit beside the parts that hurt without pushing them away. At first, this may feel unnatural. You might feel resistance. After all, you've been trained to fix yourself, not love yourself as you are. You've been taught to be productive, not present, to be good, not whole. But meta times isn't about making you good, it's about making you whole times again asterisk. When you close your eyes and bring your attention to the heart, you're not trying to force a feeling, you're offering space. You're saying, whatever is here, I won't turn away. You begin with gentle phrases, repeated like seeds. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be kind to myself. May I live with ease. You don't need to feel them at first. You only need to offer them, like planting seeds in soil you've forgotten how to trust. And then you direct these same wishes toward the parts of you you've rejected, to the memory that makes your stomach drop, to the version of you that hurt others when you didn't know better, to the habits you hide, and to the shame that still lives in your body. May this part of me be held. May this pain be softened. May this fear know it's not alone. May this shame feel seen without punishment. This is not self-pity. It's not denial. It's fierce compassion, the kind that sees clearly and still stays, the kind that doesn't need you to be cleaned up to be worthy. When you meet your inner shadows with meta asterisk, you begin to unlearn a lifelong habit, rejection. Most people try to meditate times away, their darkness, but this practice says, bring it with you. Not to indulge it, but to understand it. Because what you meet with love transforms. What you avoid controls you. Guilt isn't healed by shame. It's softened by truth and care. Fear isn't silenced by willpower. It's calmed by presence. Shame doesn't disappear through achievement. It dissolves through understanding. Asterisk, meta doesn't rush. It doesn't demand perfection. It meets what's real again and again, until that meeting becomes familiar. And eventually, the parts of you that once flinched at your own presence begin to soften, because they finally feel safe. You begin to see that the most wounded parts of you are not enemies. They are younger versions of you, stuck in survival mode. They need attention, not punishment. They need warmth, not discipline. They need your own heart to come home to them. And this homecoming is slow, but it's steady. It happens every time you breathe gently into a tight space in your chest and say, "You're allowed to be here." Every time you remember that you are not your thoughts, and yet you can hold them with tenderness. Every time you say no to the inner voice that shames you, and yes to the voice that soothes. The deeper you go into time's meta-asterisk, the more you begin to understand this truth. Love isn't something you give yourself once and then move on. It's a practice, a rhythm, a returning, especially when it's hard, especially when the old stories rise up again. The ones that say, "You're too broken, too late, too far gone." Those stories don't need to be argued with. They need to be times seen through asterisk. And the seeing comes through softness, through repeating the phrases again, through remembering that even the worst thought about yourself is still just a thought, and that thoughts pass, but the heart remains. This isn't about pretending you're okay. It's about knowing that being times not times okay is also part of the path. That you can hold the mess and the magic in the same hands, that you can sit in silence and feel pain without being consumed by it, and that you can love yourself not because of your strength, but through your tenderness. This kind of practice builds something unshakable, not a shield, but a sanctuary, a space inside that says, no matter what you feel, you don't have to go away. When the world feels overwhelming, you return here. When mistakes weigh heavy, you return here. When your mind says you're not good enough, you return here. To breath, to space, to kindness, to the simple act of saying, "May I be kind to this moment. May I be gentle with what I find here. May I let myself belong to this breath." You're not healing yourself so you can be more acceptable. You're healing yourself because you finally remember you were never meant to be at war with yourself in the first place. Asterisk, meta times for the shadow self isn't the end of the journey, but it's the part where things begin to soften, where what was frozen begins to melt, where the armor starts to fall, and beneath it, something unexpected rises, not perfection, but peace. A peace that doesn't need to prove anything, a peace that doesn't collapse in the face of discomfort, a peace that can say, "Yes, I carry pain, and I carry love too. You carry both. You always have. But now you're learning how to hold them together, not as opposites, but as companions, as parts of one whole human heart. This is what it means to be free, not by erasing what hurts, but by including it in love so fully that it loses its sharpness. This love is yours to offer. Every day, every breath, every time you return, no matter how far you've drifted, no matter how long it's been, right now is a perfect moment to begin again, to hold both the mess and the magic within yourself, to sit in silence, acknowledging pain without letting it consume you, to love yourself not for your strengths, but for your capacity for tenderness. This kind of practice cultivates something unshakable, not a defensive shield, but a safe sanctuary within, a space that whispers, whatever you feel, you don't need to escape. When the world overwhelms, you can always return here. When mistakes weigh heavily on your heart, return here. When your mind tells you you're inadequate, come back here to breathe, to find space, to offer kindness, to simply say, "May I be kind to this moment. May I be gentle with what I find within myself. May I simply allow myself to belong to this breath." You're not healing to become more acceptable. You're healing because you're finally remembering you were never meant to be at war with yourself. Meeting your shadow self isn't the end, but the beginning of a softening, where what was frozen begins to melt, and the armor you've worn starts to fall away. And beneath it all, something unexpected emerges. Not perfection, but a deep sense of peace. A peace that needs no proving. A peace that doesn't shatter in the face of discomfort. A peace that acknowledges, yes, I carry pain, and I also carry love. You hold both within you. You always have. Now, you're learning to hold them together, not as opposites, but as companions, integral parts of your whole human heart. This is the essence of freedom, not erasing what hurts, but embracing it so fully in love that it loses its sharpest edge. This love is yours to give, every day, every breath. Every time you return to yourself, no matter how far you've wandered, no matter how long it's been, this moment is the perfect opportunity to begin again. Even as kindness starts to blossom within, the judging voice may still linger, lurking in the background, ready to pounce when you stumble, fall short, or simply feel insecure. It speaks in harsh, critical tones. You're not enough. You're wrong. Yet again. You'll never change. That voice is unmoved by your progress. Your victories don't soften it. It clings to your flaws as if they were undeniable truths, and the most painful part is just how convincing it sounds. But what if that voice isn't telling the truth? What if the one judging you isn't really you at all? There's a profound, subtle, often misunderstood teaching that begins to unravel this illusion. It's called times anatta asterisk, or non-self. Far from being cold or confusing, it holds one of the most comforting truths you'll ever encounter. You are not that voice that tears you down. You are not fixed, not frozen in identity, and not trapped inside a story you didn't choose. Non-self isn't the absence of life, but the absence of limitation. It starts with a simple observation. Thoughts come and go on their own. You don't consciously plan every emotion. You don't invite every memory. The mind moves like the weather. Clouds of criticism may pass through, but they aren't the sky itself. They don't define it, and they don't stay forever. When the Buddha taught about non-self, he wasn't saying you don't exist. He was pointing to a deeper freedom, that what you times think times you are isn't what you truly are. Not the voice in your head, not the pain in your chest, not the labels others have given you, not even the name you call yourself. You are awareness, and awareness doesn't have to believe every thought it notices. Self-criticism thrives when you mistake thoughts for identity, when I feel like a failure becomes I times am times a failure. But the moment you step back and see the thought as just that, a thought, it loses its power. It becomes what it always was, a passing mental event, not a life sentence. This shift isn't intellectual, it's experiential. You don't argue yourself out of judgment. You watch it. You witness how it arises, how it speaks, and how it fades away. And in that watching, something loosens. The belief that it times must times be true begins to weaken. You start to see through the old labels, the inner critic, the feeling of unworthiness, the pressure to be perfect. They start to look less like reality and more like habits. And habits can be changed. Asterisk anatta times helps you see that the version of yourself you're criticizing is already gone. Every moment you are shifting, not in a chaotic way, but in a living, breathing way. No thought is permanent, no feeling lasts forever, no identity remains fixed. This doesn't mean you float through life without responsibility. It means you stop punishing yourself for being human. It means the mistakes you made yesterday don't define you today. It means the voice that says, you always do this, or you never change, is simply recycling old patterns. It means you can stop carrying your past like a burden and meet yourself freshly, as you are now, not as you once were. Through the lens of non-self, even the harshest judgments lose their sting, because who exactly are they judging? The one who no longer exists, the thought that's already gone, the action that passed like a breeze through the body. And if you are not a fixed thing, if you are not bound to one version of yourself, then you are free to grow. Self-love, through the lens of times anatta asterisk, becomes less about affirmations and more about understanding. You understand that your inner critic isn't the truth, just a voice shaped by various causes and conditions, upbringing, pain, fear, and stories. You don't need to silence it with force. You simply stop mistaking it for your true identity. The more you recognize the impermanence of each thought, the more spacious your mind becomes. You no longer believe everything it tells you. You become less reactive, less controlled. You notice the urge to judge and choose not to fuel it, not out of effort, but out of clarity. And in that clarity, self-compassion has room to grow. You start to speak to yourself with more tenderness. You begin to recognize when criticism arises from fear, and instead of following it, you offer comfort. You remind yourself, this too will pass. You learn to pause when the judging voice rises and ask, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this who I want to be in this moment? That questioning doesn't stem from anxiety. It arises from wisdom. It comes from the growing understanding that identity is not fixed, that you are not just what you've done, and that you can meet yourself with fresh eyes every time. This isn't detachment in a cold sense, it's release. Release from false certainty, from painful labels, from the idea that you are some permanent thing that can be broken. You are not broken, you are becoming, and becoming requires space. Space to make mistakes, to evolve, to change direction, to soften into who you are without rigid expectations. Non-self provides that space, a letting go of the grip around me, mine, I always, I never. In that letting go, your suffering begins to dissolve, not because you've fixed everything, but because you've stopped clinging so tightly to the one who must be fixed. This shifts how you move through life. You become less defensive when others criticize you, because you no longer believe that criticism strikes at some solid core. You become more open to learning, because growth doesn't threaten your identity. You stop needing to protect a specific version of yourself and start becoming curious about the next one that might emerge. Self-criticism is often rooted in fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being unlovable. But when you see that self is not a fixed object, those fears soften. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to meet every expectation to be whole. You only need to be present to meet this moment with sincerity. Even if you're scared, even if you feel small, even if you don't know what comes next in that meeting, love becomes possible again. Not love based on performance, appearance, or worthiness, but love rooted in presence, openness, and truth. You are not the voice that judges. You are the awareness that notices. You are not the past mistake. You are the capacity to learn from it. You are not frozen. You are fluid, living, changing, and worthy. This isn't just philosophy. It's practical. The next time the inner critic appears, don't argue, don't collapse, just notice. Watch the thought arise, linger, and fade. Don't label it as me. Don't wrap your worth around it. Instead, breathe, stay present, let the thought pass. You don't need to push it away. You don't need to hold it close. You just don't need to become it. This is the gift of non-self. It doesn't erase your existence. It liberates it. It reminds you that everything painful you've believed about yourself is just one moment in a river that never stops flowing, and you are not stuck. You are free to begin again, now and now and now. As you start to release those harsh self-definitions, something subtle occurs. The inner noise begins to quiet. The stories you once believed about who you are start to fade, like fog lifting from a still lake. But beneath that fading noise, something else is revealed. Not more answers, but more questions. A gentle ache, a space longing to be heard. And the only way to hear it is to stop speaking. There is a silence that isn't just emptiness, absence, or avoidance. It's alive, deep, and what the Buddha called noble silence. A silence that holds, not hides, that opens, not shuts down. It's not about banishing sound from your life, but removing distortion from your perception. This silence isn't escape, it's meeting, and the one you meet when all else falls quiet is yourself. The world is filled with noise, both external and internal. Devices hum, notifications buzz, thoughts swirl, voices rise, expectations press, and over time, the mind gets used to running, always doing, always planning, always trying to control what comes next. Even the effort to love yourself can become just another task on a long list. But silence asks for something different. It asks you to stop seeking long enough to feel, to stay present long enough to notice, to make space for what hasn't been heard, not from the outside, but from within. Noble silence isn't simply being quiet. It's the absence of reaction. It's the pause between thought and speech, the stillness between emotion and response. It's the moment you choose not to fill the space just to avoid discomfort. In that space, your inner world becomes clearer. Thoughts rise, but you no longer follow each one. Emotions appear, but you don't immediately analyze them. You begin to see the layers beneath the surface. The hunger for validation, the loneliness buried under busyness, the fatigue masked as irritability, the sadness tucked behind a smile. Noble silence isn't passive, it's deeply active in a different way. It listens without fixing, it allows without rushing, it waits without needing to solve. And through that waiting, unmet needs rise into awareness. This practice helps reveal how you've been disconnected, not just from others, but from yourself. You begin to notice how often you interrupt your own emotions with thinking, how quickly you label discomfort as something to fix instead of feel, how often your thoughts jump in before your heart even has time to speak. In silence, the heart finally finds its voice. You may discover grief living where you thought there was only numbness, or longing existing beneath habits of distraction. You may find that what you really needed wasn't another task, but a moment of honest stillness. When you stop speaking, not only outwardly but inwardly, the walls begin to lower. You no longer use words as a shield. You begin to relate to your own presence in a new way, without commentary, without filters. In that quiet, self-love takes on a different shape. It becomes less about affirmations and more about deep listening. You begin to sense what your body has been trying to say, what your nervous system has been holding, what your breath has been asking for. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's real. The mind often searches for healing in more effort, more action, more change, but sometimes the heart just needs space to speak, space it rarely gets in a noisy, fast-paced world. Silence is the act of saying, I am here now with myself, and I'm not leaving. This kind of presence is healing, not because it gives you instant answers, but because it removes pressure. It allows your system to soften, and it teaches you to trust that simply being with what is, without force, can reveal what needs attention. Through noble silence, you become more aware of your patterns, the urge to escape discomfort, the need to explain yourself, the pressure to perform. All of it becomes visible, not so you can judge it, but so you can understand it. Understanding replaces shame, and with understanding comes compassion. You begin to treat your own silence, not as emptiness, but as a kind of care, a kind of holding a place where your emotions can arrive without needing to justify themselves. Even the most difficult feelings soften when met with quiet attention, not because they disappear immediately, but because they are allowed to be real. Noble silence teaches you that nothing inside you is wrong, only unheard. And so you learn to sit, not to escape, but to stay, to let the body settle, to let the mind unclench, to let the inner child speak without interruption, to let sadness rise without needing to push it back down. In that practice, you begin to notice the difference between being silent and being still. Being silent is about volume. Being still is about presence. It is the stillness that allows the silence to heal. This practice creates room for intuition to rise, the part of you that already knows what you need. It speaks in whispers, not in shouts, and it can only be heard when you're quiet enough to listen. Sometimes what it tells you is simple. Rest, breathe, let go, trust. Other times it reveals the deeper pain you've been avoiding. And in that revelation, you don't crumble. You open, because you're not fighting anymore. You're not resisting your own experience. You are receiving it. Silence isn't about isolation. It's about connection, true connection, the kind that doesn't require performance, approval, or explanation. It's the place where presence meets reality without pushing it away. In silence, your heart becomes your home again. You no longer chase healing. You create the conditions for it to arrive. You no longer rush toward peace. You allow space for peace to emerge. There is a safety in realizing you can be with yourself in stillness without panic, that you don't need to fill every moment, that you don't need to justify your existence, that simply being quietly and openly is enough. You start to feel your own rhythm. You begin to notice how much of your energy has gone into managing impressions, filling silence, and proving your worth. And you start letting go, not to collapse, but to return. This return is gentle. It asks nothing from you but presence. And presence, when offered with care, becomes the deepest form of love. Even 10 minutes of silence a day can shift something, not because it changes your circumstances, but because it reconnects you to yourself. It reminds you that you are not the noise, not the identity, not the pressure. You are awareness, breathing here. And in that awareness, you realize something quietly profound. You don't need to be anyone else in this moment. You don't need to earn love. You don't need to fix the past. You don't need to rush forward. You just need to stay with what's here, stay with yourself. Silence becomes not a practice, but a relationship with presence, with inner knowing, with kindness. A relationship that doesn't need many words because it speaks through stillness. And over time, you begin to crave this space, not because it's always comfortable, but because it's always honest. It becomes your anchor, your retreat, your reset. You start to carry that stillness with you, even into the noise. The world doesn't get quieter, but you do. You move more slowly. You speak more thoughtfully. You listen more deeply, not just to others, but to yourself. This is the gift of noble silence. Not a break from life, but a return to it. A return to clarity, to presence, to softness. And in that return, you finally hear what's been waiting all along. A voice not of judgment, but of care. A voice not loud, but true. A voice that says, you've always been enough, even in silence, especially there. When you begin to listen deeply, without interrupting your inner world, you start to uncover a truth that may feel hard to face at first. There are things in your past that still hurt, moments you wish had gone differently, words you said you wish you hadn't, choices you carry like stones in your pocket. In the silence, those memories return, not to punish you, but to be healed. They rise, not as enemies, but as invitations, and what you do with them now will shape how you carry yourself forward. In the teachings of karma, most people hear the word and think of punishment, cause and effect, but laced with fear, as if every misstep dooms you, as if your past locks you out of peace. But that is a misunderstanding. Karma isn't a sentence, it's a seed, and how you relate to it determines whether you grow or stay stuck. Karma means that every action leaves an imprint, but imprints are not chains, they are patterns, and patterns can be understood, shifted, and softened. There is no karmic law that says you must be defined by who you were. Karma only asks, what are you doing now? The pain you feel over past mistakes isn't karma punishing you. It's your deeper self recognizing that something is out of alignment. It's a signal, not to spiral in shame, but to pause, reflect, and respond with care. To hold karma this way is to hold your past differently, not as a burden, but as a teacher, not as something broken, but as something that reveals your strength. There's an art from Japan called Time's Kintsugi asterisk, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, it fills them with something precious. The broken parts become the most beautiful. The damage isn't covered up, it's honored. This is how you can hold your karma, not to ignore what happened, not to pretend it didn't matter, but to see the cracks in your story as places where healing can shine through. The moments you regret become entry points into self-compassion. The choices you wish you could take back become opportunities to grow new roots in wisdom. You are not meant to be untouched by life. You are meant to be shaped by it, softened by it, and made whole through it. If you have caused harm to others or to yourself, karma invites you to face that with openness, not to collapse into guilt, but to bring awareness to your impact. Regret, when met with presence, becomes a form of accountability, and accountability, when paired with compassion, becomes transformation. What matters most is your relationship with the present moment. What are you planting now? How are you responding now? The seeds of the past may still be blooming, but you are the one who waters what grows next. Karma is alive. It changes with your actions, your thoughts, your intentions. When you act from awareness and love, you begin to reshape the direction of your life, not by erasing the past, but by choosing something new from this moment forward. This requires a shift in perspective, one that stops seeing mistakes as evidence of failure and starts seeing them as chapters in a story that is still being written. Not everything painful is permanent. Not every scar is shameful. Not every misstep means you're lost. You can choose to hold your past as a map, not of everything that went wrong, but of everything that has led you to understanding. The Buddhist path does not teach perfection, it teaches presence. It teaches that even if you've fallen down 1,000 times, each time you rise is an act of awakening. Each time you choose kindness over harshness to yourself or others, you soften the karmic imprint of harm. Each time you respond with patience instead of reaction, you shift the energy of your life. There is no one watching you to keep score. There is no cosmic punishment system. There is only the flow of cause and effect, and your capacity to meet it with clarity. Sometimes the hardest karma isn't what happens outside you, but the emotional patterns you carry. Cycles of self-blame, habits of avoidance, responses that come before you even think. These too are karma, and they are not permanent. You can begin to bring awareness to them. You can ask, without judgment, what story is repeating here? What feeling am I avoiding? What am I believing about myself that keeps me in pain? And then, in that clarity, you can choose differently. This choosing is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as pausing before speaking, breathing instead of reacting, apologizing without defending, forgiving without forgetting. Karma is shaped in small choices, and the gold in your healing is built from those choices, one breath at a time. Even the most painful chapters can teach you how to live more wisely. That relationship you lost taught you what love isn't. That decision you regret showed you your boundaries. That moment you weren't proud of revealed where you were hurting. You begin to see that you are not the same person who made those choices. You are the one who now sees them clearly. You are the one growing new intentions from old wounds. This kind of healing doesn't deny what happened. It simply refuses to let it be the end of the story. Karma teaches that energy continues, but what you do with that energy, how you shape it, how you redirect it, how you meet it, is up to you. You can use it to build wisdom, to grow empathy, to become more gentle, not more guarded. The cracks in your life are not signs of weakness. They are places where the light can shine through. They are where your deepest self begins to speak. They are where you become real. And in that realness, you begin to feel something return, not perfection, not control, but integrity. You begin to live more honestly, speak more clearly, and act more consciously. You are no longer running from your past. You are walking with it, not as a weight, but as a companion that taught you how to begin again. In this way, karma becomes not a punishment, but a path, a living reminder that everything you do matters, not because you must be flawless, but because your presence carries power. Even when you've hurt someone, you can repair. Even when you've hurt yourself, you can choose differently now. You are broken, yes, but know that you're being reshaped by truth itself. And the truth invariably sets you free. So, persevere, keep practicing. Consciously choose the next kind act, the next honest expression, the next deliberate step forward. As you commit to this path, you'll begin to perceive your life through a new lens, not as a string of errors, but as the beautiful, intricate unfolding of a human being. You'll no longer feel the need to erase the past. Instead, you'll weave it, with compassion and patience, into the tapestry of who you are becoming, adorning it with golden threads. This gold, this wisdom born from the process of breaking and mending, becomes an integral part of your strength, your capacity for love, your inner peace. When you begin to view your past through the eyes of wisdom, when you cease trying to erase what once caused pain and instead choose to honor it, something extraordinary begins to emerge, a new kind of love. This love isn't born from striving to be better or more worthy. It's not something earned through rapid healing or hasty forgiveness. It's a love that simply graces you as you soften into your own being, unpretentious, selfless, quiet, constant, and utterly genuine. But even this profound love requires guidance. It needs roots to anchor it. Without direction, even the purest love can become confusing. Too much, and it becomes clingy. Too little, and it fades away. Some days, it feels like compassion. Other days, like pressure. This is why the Buddha offered a clear path, not merely a theoretical concept of love, but a path of love fully embodied. Love held in balance. Love that flourishes in 4 distinct directions. This path is known as the Brahma Viharas, the 4 immeasurable states of heart and mind, 4 ways of relating to yourself and the world that are grounded in clarity, not driven by desire. They are not emotions to be chased, but rather inner qualities to be cultivated. Together, they create a solid foundation for self-love, one that remains grounded and doesn't get lost in ego, guilt, or imbalance. The first is times meta asterisk, loving kindness. This isn't just a feeling, but a wish, a gentle offering of goodwill extended not only to others, but also to yourself. It's about treating yourself with care, even when you feel undeserving, and facing life with gentleness, even when it's challenging. This is the genesis of self-love. Practicing kindness without condition, not only when you succeed or when you feel calm, but also when you feel overwhelmed, disappointed, or afraid. Loving kindness teaches you to stop waiting to feel times lovable, and instead to begin the practice times of loving. Even if all you can manage is to whisper, "May I be safe, may I be well, may I be kind to myself." Repeating that wish over time will transform the way you hold your own heart. Next is times karuna asterisk, compassion. It goes beyond simple kindness, meeting pain precisely where it resides. It says, "I see your suffering, and I will not turn away." Self-compassion means ceasing to scold yourself for your struggles, refraining from rushing your healing process, and stopping the endless questioning of why you still feel what you feel. Instead, offer yourself the same tenderness you would offer a dear friend. This doesn't mean indulgence or making excuses. It means approaching your wounds without judgment, allowing pain to simply be pain so that it can move through you. Compassion doesn't try to fix everything immediately. It remains present, allowing and holding space. It acknowledges that being human is both messy and beautiful, often simultaneously. As you cultivate compassion for your own suffering, you dismantle the false belief that you must be flawless to be loved. Then comes times mudita asterisk, sympathetic joy. This can feel more challenging, especially when your own life feels burdened, but it is essential. It teaches you to celebrate, not from a place of comparison or competition, but from a shared sense of humanity. Self-directed times, mudita times, means allowing yourself to experience joy without guilt, to be happy when things go well, to laugh without wondering if you're permitted, and to find pleasure in the small things. A clear breath, a warm touch, a moment of connection without feeling that it must be earned. It's joy that arises from presence, not from perfection. This is where self-love expands, moving beyond mere solace and embracing the fullness of life. When you grant yourself permission to feel joy, even when everything isn't fixed, you open your heart to life as it is, and that joy becomes a source of resilience. Finally, there's times upekkha asterisk, equanimity, the balance that supports all the rest. Without it, love becomes entangled, compassion turns into overwhelm, and joy becomes attachment. But with equanimity, you learn to remain centered, to care without clinging, to feel deeply without being consumed. It involves being present with your experience as it unfolds, without pushing it away or chasing after it. It means trusting your inner ground, even when life surges in waves. It doesn't mean feeling times nothing asterisk, but rather being stable enough to feel times everything asterisk. When you practice equanimity, you cease trying to control what happens and instead learn to respond with wisdom. You begin to trust that you can hold both joy and sorrow, ease and pain, praise and blame, not because you've shut down your heart, but because your heart has grown strong enough to stay open through it all. These four, asterisk, metta, karuna, mudita, asterisk, and times upekkha, asterisk, become a compass, not a checklist of qualities to perfect, but rather living directions to return to. When you feel lost, you check in with yourself. Am I being kind? Am I meeting this with compassion? Am I allowing joy? Am I balanced? They prevent you from swinging too far in any one direction, from becoming overly self-critical or emotionally detached, from denying your pain or clinging to your happiness. They keep your love grounded, flexible, and real. They also help you to love without ego, because they are not about boosting your self-image. They are about seeing clearly, loving what times is asterisk, not what times should be asterisk. And that includes yourself. You begin to notice the places where your self-love has become conditional. I'll be kind to myself. Times I stop making this mistake. I'll let myself rest. Times I've done enough. I'll feel joy times I finally fix everything. The Brahma Viharas dissolve these conditions. They remind you that kindness is available times now, asterisk. Compassion is available times now, asterisk. Joy is available times now, asterisk. Balance is available times now, asterisk. They teach you that love is not something you chase, it's something you cultivate, not by forcing it, but by tending to it, watering it, and returning to it. As you practice the four immeasurables, you begin to see how love grows from attention, not ambition, and from care, not control. You begin to extend that same understanding to others. The more patience you have with yourself, the less you judge others. The more you meet your own pain with compassion, the more you can recognize pain in others without needing to fix it. The more you celebrate your own joy, the less envy you feel. The more balance you hold within, the more peaceful your relationships become. But it always begins within. You don't practice these to be perfect. You practice because they are the soil of a life rooted in peace. And peace doesn't come from escaping yourself, it comes from returning, again and again, to presence, to kindness, to the breath, to the moment. That return times is times the practice. That return times is times the path. The Brahma Viharas are not distant ideals, they are human capacities. They already exist within you. You've felt them before. Brief moments of warmth, of softness, of joy, of steadiness. Practicing means creating space for those moments to grow, giving them your attention, trusting that, with time, they will shape how you live and love. You begin to live not from habit, but from intention, not from defense, but from openness, not from fear, but from care. And true care never comes with conditions. It simply remains, breath by breath, softly, quietly, fully. This is what balanced self-love looks like. Not loud, not inflated, just honest, just grounded, just enough. And from that ground, everything begins to grow. When love becomes balanced, when kindness is steady, and when joy is shared without comparison, something profound begins to open beneath it all. You stop holding your experiences so tightly, you stop needing each feeling to stay. You begin to sense there is something deeper beneath all the doing, all the striving, all the becoming. Not a times thing, times to grasp, but a times space, times to rest into. And this is where many turn away because it feels unfamiliar. To release even the times idea, times of who you are, to let go of fixed identity, even for a moment can feel like stepping into the unknown. But what arises in that unknown is not fear, it is freedom. There is a teaching at the heart of Buddhist understanding that holds this truth gently. Asterisk, shunyata, asterisk, or emptiness. Often misunderstood, often feared, yet never meant to be cold. Emptiness is not absence. It is not despair. It is the quiet space where transformation becomes possible. It is what allows new life to grow where old clinging once lived. Emptiness is not the denial of life. It is what gives life room to move. The mind, by habit, tries to solidify everything. It turns moments into identities, pain into personality, and emotions into lifelong narratives. It makes things stick because it believes that to let go is to lose something essential. But this tightness, this grasping, is what creates so much of your suffering. The belief that everything must be held in place, that every thought means something permanent, that every emotion defines you. And so, the idea of emptiness feels threatening because it seems to suggest that nothing matters. But the truth is, emptiness means that times everything times can matter because times nothing times is fixed. It means that no emotion, no judgment, no habit defines your essence. There is space between all things, and in that space is where compassion grows. When you understand emptiness directly, you stop believing the stories that once held you captive. The thought that you are too broken, the feeling that you're not lovable, the idea that your past defines you. These thoughts may still come, but they no longer take root so deeply. You begin to sense that they are appearances, real but passing, influential but not absolute. You don't need to destroy the stories. You only need to see that they're not solid. And once you see that, you are free to relate to them with care instead of fear. This is what emptiness offers. It loosens the grip, softens the edges, and gives you space to breathe. You realize you are not a fixed self reacting to a fixed world. You are awareness, flowing, responsive, ever-changing. This doesn't mean life loses meaning. It means you get to choose times what meaning you give, not as a way to escape truth, but as a way to live it more consciously. You start asking different questions, not who am I really, but how can I respond with wisdom times right now, asterisk. Not what times should times I be, but what is times needed times here from a place of love. The fixed self falls away, and what remains is freedom. Emptiness is not hollow, it's full of potential. It's the field before the seed is planted, the space between breath and thought, the pause before response. It is the ground from which compassion, insight, and transformation rise naturally. The idea of identity as fixed is what leads to judgment. If you are times always times this, then change feels threatening. But when you see that you are a fluid process, that everything you experience is arising due to conditions and will eventually pass, you stop needing to be so rigid. There is safety in that, not because things are predictable, but because you no longer need them to be. You can let things pass without grasping. You can let go without fear of losing who you are, because who you are is not a fixed story. It's a dynamic, alive experience, and emptiness is the canvas that allows it to move. In daily life, this becomes practical. You feel anger, but you don't hold on to it. It moves through you like wind through branches. You feel sadness, but you stop turning it into a conclusion about your life. You begin to experience emotions directly without attaching meaning that distorts them. This gives your inner world more space, and in that space, compassion becomes easier. Forgiveness feels more natural. Judgment softens because you see that no one is one thing forever, not even you. You also stop defining yourself by your achievements, your roles, or your image. These things may still exist, but they no longer form the core of your identity. You stop grasping for praise or hiding from criticism. You become less reactive because there's no tight sense of self to defend, just this breath, this body, this moment. When your identity is not fixed, your value doesn't depend on doing everything right. You are no longer trapped by the need to protect who you think you are. You can admit mistakes without shame. You can accept compliments without clinging. You can face change without losing your ground. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you responsive. You begin to act not from fear of loss, but from clarity. Not to prove yourself, but to express presence. Even suffering changes when seen through this lens. It becomes something to meet, not something to avoid. It's seen as arising from causes and conditions, not from some permanent flaw in who you are. And that changes how you relate to it. You stop blaming, you stop resisting, you start listening. In that listening, healing begins. The mind that understands emptiness becomes less caught in struggle. It holds life more gently. It allows others to be who they are without needing to change them. It allows space for pain, but also for peace. It is no longer trapped in the illusion that things must stay the same to feel safe. You begin to sense a kind of intimacy with life because nothing is solid. Everything can be touched because nothing is fixed. Everything can be held. This is not theory, it is a way of being. And it is discovered slowly through practice, through presence, through letting go of the need to define everything. You start small. You notice when you are holding on too tightly to a thought. You see when you are making a feeling into a fact. You pause. You breathe. You soften. You remember, asterisk. This too will pass, asterisk. That remembrance is freedom. You no longer need to protect an identity. You can simply respond with wisdom, again and again. And through this, life becomes more spacious, not because pain disappears, but because it no longer defines the whole landscape. There is more room, more breath, more choice. You begin to see beauty in the impermanent because it teaches you to appreciate without clinging. You begin to see depth in the uncertain because it reminds you to stay curious. Emptiness is not cold, it is open. And in that openness, you find a new kind of warmth, not based on certainty, but on presence. You discover that compassion doesn't need a reason, that love doesn't require a perfect identity, that healing doesn't come from fixing, but from meeting. The space of emptiness becomes the space of kindness, the space where you can rest, the space where you can grow. And from that space, you begin to live not as a fixed self, but as a flowing awareness, kind, clear, alive. This is the heart of emptiness. Not absence, not void, but freedom. And in that freedom, the deepest kind of self-compassion becomes possible, because now nothing in you is permanent, and so nothing is beyond care, nothing is unworthy of love. You don't have to chase who you times were, asterisk. You don't have to defend who you times are, asterisk. You don't have to fear who you times will become, asterisk. You simply return to this space, over and over. And in that returning, you remember what's always been true. There is room for all of you here. And in that room, you are free. The more you rest in spaciousness, the more clearly you begin to see what you've been carrying, not just the emotions or memories, but the patterns, the subtle loops you move through again and again. Thoughts that trigger feelings, feelings that drive reactions, reactions that reinforce painful beliefs. It's not random, and it's not your fault, but it's also not permanent. There is a map for this, a teaching that gently shows you how suffering builds itself, piece by piece. It's not punishment, it's a pattern. And that pattern can be seen, it can be understood, and when it's understood, it can be rewritten. This is the law of dependent origination. Asterisk, Paticca Samuppada asterisk, a core insight of the Buddha's teaching. It reveals the chain of cause and effect, not as an abstract theory, but as a lived reality times inside you asterisk. It shows how suffering isn't something that appears out of nowhere. It has a beginning, it has fuel, and when the fuel is no longer added, it begins to dissolve. At the center of this law is a simple truth. Nothing arises independently. No emotion, no thought, no belief stands alone. Everything depends on conditions. When those conditions are present, the experience arises. When they change, the experience fades. For example, the belief that you are not good enough didn't appear on its own. It may have been shaped by early criticism, by trauma, by societal pressure, or by repeated rejection. Over time, those experiences planted seeds. Each time you felt misunderstood, those seeds were watered. Eventually, the story grew, and now it lives as if it's truth. But it times isn't times truth, it's a result, and that means it can be interrupted. The chain of suffering usually begins with contact. Something is seen, heard, remembered, or felt. That contact triggers sensation, which brings up feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The mind doesn't stop there. It adds craving or resistance. Then comes identification. You start to take it personally. The discomfort becomes times your times discomfort. The fear becomes times your times flaw. The thought becomes times your times identity. And then action follows. You react based on the story. Maybe you withdraw. Maybe you lash out. Maybe you numb. That reaction creates more conditions, more evidence for the story, and so the cycle repeats. What makes this process powerful is not that it happens. It's that you can see times it while it happens. And that moment of awareness is the beginning of freedom. You don't need to fight every thought. You don't need to suppress every emotion. You just need to understand what's fueling them. When you see the links, you stop being trapped by them. Let's say you notice a feeling of unworthiness rise when someone doesn't respond to your message. The old story appears. Asterisk. They don't care asterisk. That story brings tightness, maybe shame, maybe anger. You feel the urge to protect or explain yourself. But instead of reacting, you pause. You ask, what led to this feeling? Maybe there was contact, the silence, then sensation. The body tenses, then the feeling, unpleasant, then the thought, asterisk, they're rejecting me, asterisk, then the belief, asterisk, I must not matter, asterisk, and that belief shapes your behavior. Now you've seen the links, and just seeing times them loosens their power. You realize it's not the silence that hurts. It's the story built on that silence. And that story comes from past wounds, not this present moment. This is the insight that breaks the loop. You begin to notice that not every emotion needs a storyline, that not every discomfort needs to mean something times about you, asterisk. You start catching the chain earlier, before the belief hardens, before the reaction takes hold. And in that early seeing, you create space. In that space, a new choice becomes possible. This isn't about times controlling your feelings. It's about interrupting the automatic reaction to them, the craving for things to be different, the aversion to discomfort, the tendency to personalize everything. With consistent awareness, you start choosing differently. You respond instead of reacting. You stay curious instead of collapsing. You begin to replace the old narrative with a new understanding. Asterisk. This is just a pattern, not a personal failure, not a fixed identity, just a habit made of many conditions, now seen clearly. Asterisk. That clear seeing is what dissolves it. This process also teaches you compassion. You realize that others, too, are moving through their own chains of cause and effect. Their harsh words may come from pain, their silence may come from fear. Their actions, like yours, are shaped by unseen forces. When you understand the links in your own suffering, you become less reactive to others. You stop taking things so personally. You start to meet people where they are, not where your story says they should be. You also begin to speak to yourself more gently. When pain arises, you ask not, "What's wrong with me?" but "What is this built on?" When judgment appears, you trace it back to comparison, to fear, to the craving for control. And again, you pause, you breathe, you see it clearly. And in that clarity, you make space for care. This is how you rewrite the story. Not with force, not by pretending the old one never existed, but by seeing how it was built and choosing not to build it again. Every time you bring awareness to the chain, you loosen it, you weaken the habit, you become less defined by the past and more open to the present. This doesn't make your life perfect, it makes it honest. You still feel, you still stumble, but now you know times why asterisk, and that knowing becomes a source of strength. You begin to notice the subtle points of contact that once went unseen, the tightness in your jaw before you react, the flicker of shame before the defense, the quick assumption before the closing down. Each of these is a doorway, not to fix, but to understand. And through that understanding, a new story begins to take shape. One where pain is met with presence, not panic. One where discomfort is explored, not feared. One where thoughts are seen as temporary, not absolute. One where self-worth is not dictated by emotion, but supported by insight. This new story is not written all at once. It's built gently, breath by breath, moment by moment. Each time you choose awareness over autopilot. And as you keep choosing, the old loops lose energy, the false identities lose their grip, and what once felt like truth starts to feel like memory, not erased, but no longer in control. You are no longer living inside someone else's story about you. You are writing your own, not with fantasy, but with deep clarity. You are shaping it with kindness, with wisdom, with each moment of seeing. The law of dependent origination is not a rule to follow. It's a mirror, a way of looking that reveals what was hidden. And what it reveals is not your flaw, it's your freedom. Because when you understand what gives rise to suffering, you understand how not to feed it. When you see what supports peace, you learn how to nourish it. You are not broken, you are patterned, and patterns can change. The story of self-worth, of who you are, of how you live. It's still being written, and now, times you times hold the pen. Once you begin to see the chain of your suffering clearly, it becomes harder to keep feeding it unconsciously. You notice when reactions are building, you recognize the moment you start slipping into old roles, and you begin to ask better questions, not "What's wrong with me?" but "What is this times really times asking for?" That question opens a door because beneath so many patterns is a powerful force that often goes unnoticed: desire. Desire itself isn't the core issue. It's perfectly natural to yearn for connection, security, growth, and peace. However, not every desire paves the path to freedom. Some desires drag you further into discontent, while others guide you toward inner clarity. The difference is subtle yet profound, and the Buddha provided us with terms to distinguish between the two. He labeled one times tanha times, and the other times chanda asterisk. Grasping the distinction between them is a crucial step in learning to cultivate self-love in a healthy, grounded manner. Without this distinction, it becomes easy to mistake compulsive striving for genuine aspiration. You might mistakenly believe you're growing when you're actually just grasping. You might think you're engaging in self-care when, in reality, you're merely avoiding discomfort. These distortions aren't a reflection of you doing something wrong, rather they stem from a failure to recognize the true underlying motivations behind your actions. Asterisk tanha times is the kind of craving that pulls you away from the present moment. It's the urge that arises from a sense of lack, a feeling that something is missing and needs to be filled immediately. It's not accompanied by clarity, but rather by tension. You experience it when you chase validation, needing someone to constantly reassure you of your worth. It manifests when you endlessly scroll through social media, hoping something will finally quiet your restlessness. It appears in subtle forms, such as perfectionism, comparison, a need to be noticed, or an addiction to constant self-improvement. It never feels like enough because it's rooted in the underlying belief that times are not enough. When you act from times tanha asterisk, even positive pursuits can become painful. You might attempt to meditate, but secretly hope it will make you more lovable. You might pursue personal growth, but measure your worth by how much you've achieved. You try to love yourself, but only if you meet certain conditions. This isn't true love. It's pressure disguised as purpose, and the more you indulge it, the more it consumes you. Asterisk, tanha times isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. But it always carries that same tightness, that nagging sense that something must change before you can truly rest. It convinces you that peace lies just one accomplishment away, one compliment away, one correction away. And the truth is, even when you obtain what it craved, the craving doesn't end. It simply shifts to something else, never truly landing. Asterisk, chanda asterisk, on the other hand, represents a different kind of energy. It's also a form of desire, but it arises from presence, not lack. It's the healthy urge to grow because you care, not because you're afraid. It's the movement toward well-being that doesn't demand perfection. It's wanting to heal, not because you're broken, but because you cherish the potential within you. Asterisk chanda times isn't about grasping for the future. It's about honoring what wants to unfold from within. This is the kind of desire that fuels genuine self-love. It motivates you to rest when your body needs it, to reflect when your mind is overwhelmed, and to speak gently to yourself, not because someone told you to, but because you've learned that harshness is ultimately unhelpful. Asterisk chanda times possesses clarity. It sees where you're going, but it also remains grounded in where you are. When your self-love is guided by times chanda asterisk, you can pursue growth without self-rejection. You can desire more for yourself without believing that you are inherently insufficient. You can make changes, not from a place of shame, but from a place of genuine care. This shift is subtle but life-changing, because the outward actions might appear the same. Two people might both decide to start meditating, one driven by times tanha asterisk, hoping it will make them more peaceful, more worthy, and more acceptable. The other moved by times chanda asterisk, an inner pull toward clarity, curiosity, and kindness. The difference lies not in the practice itself, but in the energy behind it. Recognizing this energy in your own life takes patience. It requires paying attention to your body, your breath, and the feeling in your chest. Craving feels tight, urgent, and as if something must happen, times now, asterisk. Asterisk. Chanda, times feels clear, open, and as if you're already okay, while also inviting you to grow. There is no shame in experiencing craving. It is inherently human. The goal isn't to eliminate all desire, but to understand it, to see it clearly, and to ask, is this coming from fear or care? From absence or connection? From pressure or presence? When you begin to discern the difference, your choices become more rooted. You're not swept away by every impulse. You don't fall for the illusion that your worth lies somewhere else. You start acting from the part of you that already trusts life, that already sees value in who you are, that doesn't need to be constantly fixed, but is always willing to listen. This understanding also helps you stop judging yourself for wanting things. There is nothing wrong with having goals, seeking comfort, or wanting to feel good in your own skin. What truly matters is how you relate to those desires. Do they pull you out of yourself or bring you back home? Do they lead to exhaustion or to balance? You begin to sense when your self-care has become self-extraction, when your striving is no longer about honoring your truth, but about proving your worth. And with that clarity, you can stop, breathe, listen, and return to time's Chanda asterisk. Returning doesn't mean giving up. It means realigning. It means moving forward without losing yourself in the process. It means allowing desire to be your ally, not your master. When you live from this place, even ambition transforms. You still work toward things, but not with the same urgency. You pursue health, not to perfect your body, but to care for your vessel. You grow, not to become someone else, but to become more connected to yourself. You relate to others, not from a need to be chosen, but from a desire to share joy. This kind of self-love doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't demand attention, but it's steady and rooted. It gives you a compass that can guide you through all the noise. And the closer you stay to it, the more resilient you become, because you are no longer at the mercy of every craving. You no longer believe that peace is somewhere far away. You stop measuring your worth against the scale of constant improvement. You let yourself rest. You let yourself be. You let yourself want what is wise, not what is frantic. Over time, Chanda times helps you build a life that is both nourishing and real. A life where goals are shaped by care, where effort is balanced with rest, and where the journey is not a sprint, but a steady walk inward. This is the path of wise desire, the path of wanting without grasping, of growing without running, and of loving yourself from the inside, not because you must become better, but because you're already worth the effort. When you begin to recognize the difference between craving and wise desire, you stop chasing approval disguised as growth. You choose goals that stem from care rather than pressure. The decisions you make begin to reflect a deeper understanding of your needs, rather than old habits of self-abandonment. But even with this clarity, another layer still holds influence, the lens through which you view yourself. Because what you see determines how you respond, and without shifting that lens, even the wisest intentions can become distorted. This is where the power of time's samadhi asterisk, right view, becomes essential. It's not just a concept to study, it's the foundation of how you perceive the world, your experiences, and your identity. When your view is clouded, everything is misunderstood. When it is clear, even difficulty becomes manageable. Right view isn't about holding the correct opinions, it's about seeing reality as it truly is. And one of the most damaging distortions it corrects is toxic self-perception, the deeply rooted belief that you are not good enough, that you are defective, unworthy, or beyond repair. These beliefs rarely originate from a single moment. They are built through years of misunderstanding, cultural conditioning, unprocessed pain, and repeated narratives. They don't simply appear in the mind. They grow through misperception, through the view that your worth is dependent on performance, image, or perfection. Right view doesn't ask you to ignore the pain you've been through. It simply asks you to question the conclusions you've drawn from it. You may have been rejected, but that does not mean you are unlovable. You may have failed, but that does not mean you are incapable. You may have made mistakes, but that does not mean you are bad. When you see clearly, you separate the event from the identity. You stop letting temporary experiences define your permanent sense of self. You understand that pain is a part of life, but suffering grows when you internalize that pain as a personal flaw. Applying right view begins with observation. You notice how your mind labels you, not just in obvious moments, but in subtle thoughts throughout the day. When you spill something, the voice says, "I'm so stupid." When you forget something, it says, "I can't do anything right." These thoughts seem harmless at first, but repeated enough, they become the way you view yourself. Right view allows you to pause and ask, is this true? Is this permanent? Is this the whole story? This kind of reflection brings awareness to automatic thought patterns. You begin to see them not as facts, but as conditioned responses. You become more curious, less reactive. Instead of agreeing with the inner critic, you investigate. You ask what it's trying to protect. You uncover the old beliefs it's built on. You offer space rather than resistance. This shift is not about forcing positivity. It's about aligning your perception with reality. You stop believing you are the voice in your head and start recognizing you are the one who hears it. That separation creates freedom. It gives you room to choose a different response, not one rooted in fear, but in understanding. Right view also transforms how you relate to emotions. Without it, difficult feelings are seen as problems. With it, they are seen as signals. Sadness becomes a call for care. Anger becomes a sign of violated boundaries. Anxiety becomes a request for safety. Emotions are no longer seen as threats to be avoided, but as messengers to be heard. When your perception changes, so does your behavior. You stop avoiding what makes you uncomfortable. You stop punishing yourself for not feeling good all the time. You start meeting your experience with more honesty and less resistance. You also stop comparing your inner world to other people's outside. You no longer use someone else's success to measure your value. You understand that what you see in others is not the whole story, just as others can't see the whole of you. This awareness reduces envy and builds empathy. You become less interested in proving yourself and more interested in knowing yourself. Right view helps you understand cause and effect with more precision. You no longer blame yourself blindly for outcomes. You see that conditions give rise to results. If you struggled with something, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means there were causes, and those causes can be studied, understood, and changed. This understanding builds confidence, because if your suffering is not fixed, if your identity is not set, then growth is not only possible, it's natural. You no longer need to strive to become someone better. You begin to allow yourself to unfold into someone more true. Right view teaches that everything you experience is part of a web of conditions. Your thoughts, behaviors, and even your identity are not isolated. They are shaped by environment, relationships, memories, and beliefs. And when those conditions shift, you shift. This doesn't make you unstable, it makes you adaptable. Toxic self-perception thrives in isolation. It grows when you believe you are the only one struggling. But right view reveals the truth of shared humanity. Everyone suffers, everyone has wounds, and everyone carries burdens you can't see. This realization softens judgment, both toward others and toward yourself. You begin to speak more gently to yourself, not because you're trying to be nice, but because you understand that harshness is not wisdom. You stop calling yourself names when you're tired or overwhelmed. You stop using your pain as evidence that you're failing. You start choosing to be nice, but because you understand that harshness is not wisdom. You stop calling yourself names when you're tired or overwhelmed. You stop using your pain as evidence that you're failing. You start choosing words that support healing rather than shame. Right view also teaches you to value intention instead of measuring your worth by results. You begin to ask, was I acting from sincerity? Did I try to bring presence even if I didn't get it right? This shift reduces anxiety. It removes the pressure to be perfect and replaces it with a commitment to stay honest. You become less interested in proving yourself and more interested in being yourself. You stop performing roles to earn love. You stop pretending to be unaffected when you're hurting. You stop hiding parts of yourself to stay acceptable. Right view gives you permission to be whole. And being whole includes your imperfection. You realize that growth is not a straight line, and healing is not always visible. Some of the deepest progress happens when you learn to stay with yourself, even when things are messy. Right view also brings clarity to your relationships. You stop seeking others to fill a void in you, You stop expecting people to rescue you from your emotions. You take responsibility for your inner world, not by controlling it, but by understanding it. With this perspective, even failure becomes something you can meet with dignity. You stop seeing it as proof of inadequacy and begin to see it as part of the process. You learn from it, you adjust, and you continue, not because you are strong in the conventional sense, but because you have stopped believing that struggle defines you. This way of seeing also brings lightness. You begin to laugh more, even at your own mistakes. You don't take your thoughts so seriously. You recognize how the mind exaggerates, how it tells stories that sound dramatic but aren't true. And in that recognition, you step back, you smile, and you breathe. Right view becomes a refuge, a place you return to when the mind is loud, when the heart is heavy, and when the world feels overwhelming. It reminds you that clarity is always possible, that even when you feel lost, the way forward begins with how you see. And when you begin to see clearly, self-love is no longer something you try to achieve. It becomes something you express, not through grand gestures, but through quiet consistency, through how you talk to yourself, through how you meet each moment, and through how you return again and again to the truth of your own worth. Right view does not ask you to deny your pain. It simply invites you to stop misinterpreting it, to see it not as proof of failure, but as part of the journey, to understand that healing is not about eliminating struggle, but about changing how you see it and how you respond. And in that response, you begin to reshape your life, not by changing everything outside, but by changing what you believe inside. You live with more ease, more presence, and more compassion. And that compassion extends outward, because when you stop seeing yourself as broken, you stop needing to fix everyone else. You begin to live with less judgment and more understanding. You become more available to yourself, to others, and to life, not because things are perfect, but because you no longer expect them to be. Right view transforms everything, not by changing what happens, but by changing how you relate to it. And that shift from confusion to clarity, from fear to compassion, is the foundation of lasting self-love. When your view begins to shift, when you stop believing every critical thought and start meeting yourself with clarity, something deeper begins to surface. Beneath the thoughts, beneath the narratives, there is still the rawness of experience, the heaviness that sits quietly in the body, the ache that words can't always touch. No matter how much insight you develop, pain still arises. No matter how much you grow, life still delivers uncertainty, loss, and heartbreak. The difference now is how you relate to it. This is where true healing begins, not in escaping suffering, but in turning toward it, not with resistance, but with warmth, not to be consumed by it, but to finally meet it without fear. The Buddha spoke of time's dukkha *, the first noble truth, often translated as suffering, but it carries more nuances: discomfort, instability, dissatisfaction, that feeling that things aren't quite how you want them to be. It exists in the mind, in the body, and in your daily life. It comes in big waves and in subtle undercurrents. And while most of the world runs from it, Buddhist practice teaches a different path, one that doesn't seek to fix it, escape it, or numb it, but to accept it without resistance. This does not mean liking suffering. It doesn't mean agreeing with it or resigning to it. Acceptance in this context means stopping the inner war. It means allowing what is already here to be seen fully, gently, and without pushing it away. When you resist pain, it multiplies. The fear of feeling it adds another layer. The shame about having it adds more. The judgment that it shouldn't be happening builds another wall. Soon, the original discomfort is wrapped in layers of suffering that make it even harder to bear. But when you turn toward time's dukkha, times with tenderness, something begins to change. You start to feel less trapped, less guarded. The pain may still be present, but it's not attacking you anymore. You stop bracing, you stop contracting, you start listening. This kind of acceptance is not a passive collapse. It's an active opening, a willingness to be present with what hurts, because pushing it away has only deepened the wound. You learn to sit with sadness without needing to explain it, to allow grief without trying to rush through it, to be with fear without letting it control your decisions. And in that sitting, that allowing, a new kind of strength is formed, a strength that doesn't need to be hard, a strength that comes from gentleness. The mind may say, "This shouldn't be happening." The body may tense in reaction, but you stay. You breathe. You recognize the mind's protest as just another movement of thought. You recognize the tension as an old habit of self-protection, and slowly you soften. Each moment of non-resistance is a moment of healing, not because it removes the pain, but because it changes your relationship with it. You stop being its victim, you become its witness. This changes your self-perception in a profound way. You begin to realize that suffering does not make you weak, that pain does not mean you're failing, and that struggling is not proof you're broken. You start to understand that being with pain is not the same as being consumed by it. You learn to hold it without collapsing. This process brings honesty. You can finally admit when you're hurting, without the need to explain or justify it. You no longer feel the pressure to perform strength. You begin to see vulnerability, not as something to hide, but as something sacred. Self-acceptance deepens here, because when you allow suffering to be part of your experience, you stop judging yourself for being human. You stop expecting constant ease. You stop resenting discomfort as a sign of deficiency. And that changes everything. You become more real, more compassionate, and more grounded. You stop fighting reality and start moving with it. This doesn't mean giving in to despair. It means letting go of the fight against what already is. It means allowing the storm to pass through you instead of trying to block the sky. You learn to trust that you can feel difficult things without becoming them, that sadness can be met with softness, that fear can be held with breath, and that loneliness can be witnessed with care. In doing this, you start to build inner safety, not by avoiding pain, but by learning how to stay with it without judgment. That safety becomes the foundation for deeper healing. The more you practice this, the more you start to see suffering as part of the human journey, not a personal flaw. You look at others with more compassion. You stop assuming everyone else has it figured out. You understand that beneath every mask, every reaction, and every silence, there may be hidden pain. This awareness fosters connection. It reminds you that you are not alone in your suffering, that you never were, and that pain is not a defect to be ashamed of, but a bridge that connects you to the heart of others. You begin to speak more kindly to yourself. When something hurts, instead of blaming yourself for feeling it, you offer space. You ask what is needed. You hold yourself with the same care you would offer someone you love. This care becomes more natural the more you practice. You stop trying to bypass the hard parts. You stop needing everything to feel good in order to feel worthy. You recognize that even in the middle of pain, love is possible. Radical self-acceptance is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice of meeting whatever arises with less resistance. It's choosing to soften rather than harden, to listen rather than suppress, and to stay rather than escape. You start to redefine what healing means. It no longer means removing all discomfort. It means becoming more skillful at being with it, more honest in naming it, and more compassionate in responding to it. This gives you resilience, not the kind that pushes through everything, but the kind that bends without breaking, that holds without controlling, and that faces truth without fear. Your relationship with your own pain transforms. You stop hiding from it and start learning from it. You begin to see that the moments that hurt the most often carry the most insight, if you're willing to listen. This listening is not easy at first. It may feel unfamiliar, but over time it becomes your strength, because through it you find your way back to yourself, not as someone to be fixed, but as someone to be met. Pain loses its sharpness when it is no longer resisted. Suffering becomes bearable when it is no longer layered with judgment. and you begin to feel a sense of peace, not because everything is easy, but because you've stopped pretending it has to be. This is the heart of accepting time's dukkha asterisk, not giving up, but giving in to the truth of your experience, letting it be seen, letting it be held, and letting it be a part of your life without making it the whole story. And when that happens, a different kind of strength rises, one that doesn't need to be seen, one that doesn't need to prove anything, and one that comes quietly through presence, through honesty, and through tenderness. This strength is what allows you to live fully, not by avoiding suffering, but by walking with it, knowing it will come, knowing it will pass, and knowing that through it all, you are still here, still breathing, and still worthy of love. The moment you stop resisting pain and begin meeting it with tenderness, something opens. Not a doorway out of the difficulty, but a soft space within it. You start to see the edges of suffering dissolve. What once felt like a private wound begins to feel less personal, less separate. You sense that your experiences, your struggles, your fears, and your longings are not just yours. They are deeply human, and they are part of a larger web that holds everyone. And in that recognition, you feel less alone. This is where the truth of interbeing begins to reveal itself. You begin to understand your existence isn't a solitary affair, your pain isn't a unique burden, and your healing isn't a solo journey. Who you are, your identity, your worth, your very evolution, is intricately interwoven with everything around you. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a literal truth. Interbeing signifies that nothing exists in isolation. Every aspect of your being arises in connection to something else. Your thoughts have been molded by the language you learned from others. Your feelings are rooted in your experiences with people, places, and stories. Even your breath, seemingly so personal, isn't solely yours. It's drawn from trees and shared with the sky. The Buddha's profound teaching of paticca samvada, or dependent origination, reveals this truth at its deepest level. Nothing comes into being without conditions. Everything you are stems from causes that are never isolated, stretching far beyond the boundaries of your individual life. When you truly grasp this, the illusion of separation begins to fade. This fundamentally changes how you perceive yourself. You're no longer just a lone individual navigating the world. You are a continuation of countless influences. Your ancestors, your environment, the kindness and harm you've experienced, the wisdom and confusion you've encountered. You are shaped, supported, and held by countless unseen hands. This doesn't diminish your individuality. Rather, it highlights that your individuality is not detached, but deeply interwoven. You are not separate from life. You are an expression of it. Seeing through this lens softens your inner critic, because when you judge yourself, you often lose sight of the context. You forget how much of your behavior was shaped by what you learned, what you lacked, and what you feared. You begin to blame yourself as if you were solely responsible for everything you feel and do. But interbeing reminds you that you were shaped, and that shaping can change. This understanding fosters compassion, not as a contrived feeling, but as a natural response to truth. You release the need to carry the weight of isolation, and you stop believing that every struggle is a personal failing. You begin to recognize that being affected by the world is not a weakness, but simply reality. When you're hurting, the cause often isn't solely within you. It encompasses conditions you didn't choose, the words you heard growing up, the systems surrounding you, the emotional patterns passed down through generations. As you begin to see these connections, blame transforms into understanding, and shame softens into awareness. You also start to recognize that your healing benefits more than just yourself. Every time you respond with patience instead of reactivity, you shift the energy you bring into the lives around you. Every time you forgive yourself, you make it easier for others to do the same. Every time you speak truth with kindness, you help create a culture of safety. Your healing becomes part of the healing of others, not because you're trying to fix them, but because your presence itself changes, becoming more open, more accepting, more whole, and in that wholeness, others feel more free to be themselves too. You start to notice this in simple ways. A gentle word to yourself makes you more patient with others. A moment of silence allows space for connection. A breath taken in awareness becomes a bridge not only to yourself, but to the world around you. Interbeing isn't an abstract concept. It's felt in everyday life. In the way your mood shifts after a kind conversation, in the way sunlight on your skin alters your thoughts, in the way a stranger's smile can soften your inner dialogue. You begin to feel how connected everything is, not because you believe it, but because you sense it directly. This perspective also dissolves pride and insecurity. When you achieve something, you know it didn't happen in isolation. Teachers guided you, friends encouraged you, and strangers created the tools you used. Even your discipline was shaped by others who modeled it. You stop clinging to success as proof of your worth. And when you fall short, you no longer collapse into self-loathing. You understand that pain wasn't chosen alone. It was influenced, triggered, inherited. This doesn't absolve you of responsibility, but it adds context. And context brings wisdom. You begin to live with more humility and more confidence, because you're no longer trying to carry the burden of being everything by yourself. You allow help, you offer help, and you see others not as separate from you, but as part of your own unfolding. Your identity begins to feel less rigid. You are not just the roles you play, the habits you carry, or the body you inhabit. You are part of a vast movement of life that expresses itself in infinite ways. And that movement includes joy and sorrow, clarity and confusion, strength and tenderness. Interbeing also teaches you that your value isn't based on self-sufficiency. In fact, the idea of total self-sufficiency is an illusion. Everyone is supported. Everyone depends on something. The shame of needing others begins to dissolve. You stop pretending you have to do everything on your own, and you also stop seeing others as threats. Competition loses its grip. You understand that someone else's success doesn't diminish your worth, someone else's beauty doesn't erase your own, and someone else's peace doesn't mean you are behind. You recognize that each being is moving through their own unique web of causes and conditions. You stop judging so quickly. You stop assuming so easily. You listen more, you understand more, and you care more. And this care isn't sentimental. It's grounded in the truth that when one person suffers, the ripple spreads, and when one person heals, the ripple spreads too. You start choosing thoughts and actions that bring healing not only for yourself, but for the whole. This view also brings deep gratitude. You start to notice how much of your life has been shaped by things outside your control: the food you eat, the air you breathe, the books that opened your mind, and the people who showed you kindness when you needed it most. Gratitude becomes natural, not forced, but obvious. You begin to live more responsibly, not because of guilt, but because of awareness. You see that your choices matter. What you consume, what you say, how you treat yourself, it all echoes, touching something beyond you. Even the smallest acts become sacred. Washing a cup, closing a door gently, speaking a kind word, all of it becomes part of the larger whole. You also feel less urgency to become someone. You stop measuring your progress in isolation. You know that being human isn't a race, it's a shared experience, and that your worth isn't found in separation, but in connection. You begin to live slower, speak softer, and breathe deeper. You notice the life around you with more tenderness, the way leaves move, the way people walk, the way your own body feels when you stop to listen. This is what it means to see through the lens of interbeing. You don't have to prove yourself. You just have to participate fully. You don't have to stand apart. You only have to show up with presence. And when you do, everything begins to change. Not because life becomes easy, but because life becomes shared. You are no longer alone in your struggle, and you are no longer separate in your joy. You belong. You always did. Now you begin to live like it. When you begin to live with the awareness that you are not separate, that you are deeply connected to others, to the earth, to each breath, it changes how you move through life. You no longer isolate your experience, and you no longer believe the story that you must carry everything on your own. This dissolving of separation reveals something powerful. The way you speak to yourself shapes how you exist in the world. It becomes clear that the voice inside, the one that narrates every moment, needs just as much mindfulness as your actions, because that voice is with you always, either tearing you down or helping you stand tall. The Buddha spoke of times samavaka asterisk, or right speech, as part of the Eightfold Path. Most people hear this and think about how they talk to others, speak truthfully, be kind, avoid gossip and harm. But what's often forgotten is that the person you speak to the most every single day is yourself, and no one else hears those words as deeply as you do. Your inner voice carries weight, the tone, the rhythm, the intention behind your thoughts. It affects how you feel, how you act, and how you see yourself. If that voice is harsh, critical, or impatient, it creates tension that ripples through your life. But if it's mindful, clear, and compassionate, it becomes a quiet refuge, not a false cheerleader, but an honest and supportive presence. Right speech inward starts with awareness. Begin to notice the language you use inside. When you make a mistake, what's the first thing you say to yourself? When you feel anxious or uncertain, how do you respond? Do you meet yourself with kindness or with blame? This awareness isn't meant to judge you. It's meant to reveal the pattern. The truth is, many people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to a loved one. They call themselves names, question their worth, and replay regrets with a tone of contempt. And it happens so often that it begins to feel normal. But this inner harshness is not harmless. It becomes a background frequency that shapes your emotional state, your sense of identity, and your relationship with the world. Right speech isn't just about using pleasant words. It's about being honest without being cruel. It's about recognizing when your thoughts are exaggerating or generalizing. It's about learning to interrupt that voice when it starts repeating old judgments that no longer serve you. One way to begin transforming your inner speech is to pay attention to accuracy. Often, the mind uses absolute language. I always mess things up. No one cares. I'll never change. These phrases are rarely true, but they carry emotional weight. They close you off, and they feed hopelessness. Mindful speech replaces absolutes with specifics. That moment was hard. I'm feeling alone right now. I've struggled before, but I've also grown. This shift doesn't erase difficulty, it gives you clarity. Another key is to reduce internal blame. When something goes wrong, the inner voice may immediately assign fault. It's your fault. You should have known better. What's wrong with you? This kind of speech doesn't help you reflect. It traps you in shame. Right speech invites you to ask instead, what led to this? What can I learn? How can I meet this with care? These questions keep you open, creating space for understanding, not self-attack. It's also important to consider the tone of your inner voice, not just the content, but the energy. Is it cold? Is it frantic? Is it dismissive? Begin to shift the tone to one of warmth, not because everything is fine, but because you deserve to be met with respect, even when things are hard. Mindful inner speech includes silence. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop the spiral of thought, take a breath, and let go of the urge to narrate or analyze. Let quiet be the response. This pause can interrupt habits of reactivity and create space for a deeper truth to emerge. Right speech inward is also about encouragement, not empty praise, but genuine support. You're trying. This matters. It's okay to feel this. You don't have to do it all right now. These phrases don't inflate the ego. They soothe the nervous system. They remind you that effort is enough, that presence is progress. One of the most powerful tools for changing inner speech is self-compassion. This doesn't mean excusing every behavior or avoiding responsibility. It means acknowledging pain without doubling it through judgment. When you make a mistake, you can still be accountable without being cruel. When you feel overwhelmed, you can allow the feeling without calling yourself weak. The quality of your inner dialogue also shapes how you relate to others. If your own mind is a place of harshness, it's hard to extend real compassion outward. You may react with irritation, defensiveness, or distance, not because you don't care, but because you're carrying too much inner tension. But when your inner voice becomes more spacious, your outer actions follow. You become more patient, more honest, more grounded. Transforming your self-talk is a practice. It won't change overnight. The old patterns may be strong, especially if they were formed early in life. But with awareness, you can begin to interrupt them. You can choose a different voice, one that doesn't distort or flatter, but simply tells the truth with care. This transformation doesn't mean eliminating all negative thoughts. It means not believing them so quickly. It means responding to them with wisdom rather than reaction. You can acknowledge fear without letting it define you. You can feel sadness without creating a story of failure around it. You can notice doubt without surrendering to it. Language matters because it builds your internal environment. Just as the words you speak to others affect relationships, the words you speak to yourself affect your relationship with your own life. When those words are rooted in right speech, they become a foundation for inner safety. You can begin small, replace one unkind phrase with a neutral one, soften one judgment, pause before finishing a sentence in your mind that you know leads nowhere helpful. Over time, these small shifts create a new pattern where your inner world becomes a place you can trust. When the voice inside is aligned with right speech, it doesn't mean you avoid truth. It means you speak truth with integrity. You say what is real, but you say it with care. You say it with the intention to support, not to punish. You say it because you want to live in harmony with yourself. Right speech inward is not a luxury. It is essential. It's how you learn to stay with yourself through difficulty, how you repair the damage caused by years of inner criticism, how you create a new language, one that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. This new language doesn't have to be poetic. It only has to be sincere. It doesn't have to sound impressive. It only has to be honest. It doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be kind. As you continue on the path of self-awareness and compassion, the voice inside will change. It will become quieter when needed, and it will become stronger when necessary. And, most importantly, it will become a friend, not because you forced it, but because you showed it what love sounds like. As your inner voice becomes more honest and kind, something profound begins to happen. You stop carrying the burden of perfection. You no longer speak to yourself like someone you're trying to fix. You start treating your inner world as a living space, not a battlefield. And in that space, you begin to see something quietly powerful. You are always changing, not just in small ways, but in every breath. And what you are today is not what you were yesterday. What you feel now is not what you'll feel forever. This truth doesn't have to be frightening. In fact, it might be the very thing that frees you. The Buddha called it the principle of impermanence. It's the understanding that everything in life, without exception, is in motion. This includes your thoughts, your feelings, your body, your beliefs, and even your identity. Nothing stays the same, and this isn't a flaw in existence. It is the essence of it. When you begin to relate to yourself through this lens, you realize that much of your suffering has come from treating what is temporary as permanent. You believed that a bad moment defined a bad life, that one mistake meant you were incapable, that an old version of yourself was still in control. But none of that holds up when you truly see impermanence, because what you see is movement, what you see is growth. This realization brings relief. You don't have to carry the weight of who you used to be. You don't have to be ashamed of choices you made when you didn't know better. You don't have to keep proving you've changed. The truth is, you're not even the same person you were a few months ago. Your cells have shifted, your thoughts have evolved, and your insight has deepened. You are a continuous unfolding, not a fixed statue. This doesn't mean your past is erased. It means your relationship to it can soften. You can forgive the past, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines the whole of you. You understand that your former self was doing the best it could with the tools it had, and now, with new tools, you are capable of new choices. That's not hypocrisy. That's growth. Impermanence teaches you to stop clinging to identities, to habits, to labels, even the ones that once gave you comfort, especially those, because the longer you hold on to something that no longer reflects your truth, the more you suffer. Letting go doesn't mean rejecting your past. It means recognizing that the past is not where you live anymore. You also begin to appreciate your present self in a new way. You understand that who you are now is a unique passing configuration. The way your mind works, the way your heart opens, the way you understand the world. This version of you is only here for a little while, not in a dramatic sense, but in a real one. The things you struggle with today may no longer affect you in a year. The things you love today may fade or deepen in ways you can't yet predict. This gives you reason to pay attention, to savor, to honor the fleeting nature of this particular moment in your life. When you resist change, you suffer. You try to hold on to a sense of self that no longer fits. You become confused when your goals shift or your values evolve. But when you embrace impermanence, you give yourself permission to adapt, to move in new directions, and to grow without apology. You stop asking, "Why am I not who I used to be?" and start asking, "What is this moment asking of me now?" This shift brings gentleness. You stop forcing yourself to stay consistent with past versions of yourself that were never meant to last forever. You begin to live more honestly, allowing your truth to change as you change. Impermanence also helps you soften your expectations. You stop demanding that joy lasts forever, and you stop fearing the end of ease. You understand that all things arise and pass, and this does not create indifference. It creates appreciation. You begin to love people more deeply because you know you won't have them forever. You begin to cherish moments more fully because you know they are passing. You begin to accept difficulty more easily because you know it too will fade. This perspective does not make you detached. It makes you awake. It also teaches you resilience. When you are in pain, you remember it won't last. When you are confused, you remember clarity will return. When you feel lost, you remember you have changed before, and you will change again. This gives you strength, not the kind that resists life, but the kind that flows with it. Impermanence also helps you release regret. You stop clinging to what could have been, you stop rewriting the past, and you stop punishing yourself for who you were. You understand that everything moves forward, and you can too. You forgive yourself because you no longer expect yourself to have known what only time could teach. You start making peace with your evolution. You let the parts of yourself that are ready to fade. You let the new parts emerge without needing to explain them. You stop asking for permission to grow. You also stop trying to define yourself in rigid terms. You no longer need a label for every feeling, and you don't need to fit a perfect mold. You allow yourself to be complex, to shift, and to contradict yourself without shame. This doesn't mean you lack integrity. It means you have allowed yourself to be alive. You begin to understand that everything in life, including love, creativity, identity, and even your pain, is a process. It has its own rhythm. It moves through you. When you stop gripping, you stop interrupting that process. You allow change to happen with less resistance. Even healing is seen differently through impermanence. It's no longer a destination. It's a practice of meeting yourself as you are, knowing that who you are will keep changing. You stop waiting for the final version of you, and you stop believing in an end point where everything is solved. Instead, you keep showing up with curiosity, with kindness, and with the willingness to keep evolving. And as you live this way, you begin to feel lighter, you carry less shame, and you judge yourself less harshly. You don't need to make every moment perfect because you understand that nothing stays. This doesn't lead to carelessness. It leads to sincerity. You stop wasting time trying to be someone you're not. You begin to live with honesty because you know it's the only way to be free. Impermanence, when truly understood, becomes a kind of love, a love that honors the present, forgives the past, and makes space for what's next. You no longer need to cling to the person you once were. You no longer need to hold your identity together with tension. You no longer believe that you must stay the same to be worthy. You are changing. You always have been. And that's not the problem. That's the beauty. Loving yourself means loving this movement, this rhythm, this breath-by-breath unfolding of who you are, not with fear, but with respect, not with control, but with trust. You are not meant to stay the same. You are meant to grow, to shift, to learn, to rise. And every version of you, past and present, deserves to be held with that same tenderness, because they were all doing their part in getting you here. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are unfolding. And every breath you take is a chance to love yourself exactly as you are, knowing that even this will change. And that is what makes it sacred. When you begin to embrace change as the nature of life, when you stop fearing the flow of who you are becoming, something else softens inside you. The grip of judgment loosens, and the old need to punish yourself for past mistakes begins to fade. But even as you grow more forgiving, there may still be one place that resists healing, the space where self-hatred hides. It doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it appears in the silence after you've tried your best, and sometimes it waits at the edge of your victories, whispering that you're still not enough. And this is where another form of practice becomes essential. A practice that doesn't just help you survive that pain, but gently teaches you how to love through it. This is the heart of Tonglen, a Tibetan meditation practice that works directly with suffering, not by avoiding it, but by breathing it in. While many traditions encourage pushing pain away, Tonglen invites you to meet it fully, to receive it, to hold it, and then to send back love. At first, this idea may sound strange. We are often taught to avoid what hurts, to protect ourselves from discomfort. But Tonglen moves in the opposite direction. It teaches you the gateway to healing lies not in resistance, but in intimacy. Even our darkest emotions hold the seeds of compassion when touched by mindful presence. The practice is simple. Sit quietly, focusing on your breath, allowing your attention to settle. Gently call to mind a part of yourself that feels heavy, closed off, or filled with pain. Perhaps a moment of shame, a memory of failure, or an inner place harboring anger, fear, or grief. Don't try to alter it. Don't push it away. Simply allow it to exist exactly as it is. As you inhale, visualize drawing in that suffering, not to be harmed by it, but to cease running from it. Breathe it in with the intention of fostering understanding. Acknowledge the pain with each inhalation. With each exhalation, send relief. Exhale gentleness. Exhale care. Exhale whatever your heart yearns to feel. Forgiveness, lightness, hope. This exchange reverses our habitual pattern. Instead of turning away from pain, you embrace it. Instead of closing your heart, you open it. The more you practice, the more natural this becomes. You discover your capacity to hold far more than you imagined, not through force, but through compassion. This practice isn't about eradicating suffering. It's about transforming your relationship with it. As you breathe in the weight within your heart and breathe out warmth, a subtle yet profound shift begins. You cease treating your pain as something inherently wrong and begin to see it as something sacred, deserving of love rather than rejection. Once you've practiced with your own pain, extend the circle outwards. Think of someone else who is struggling, someone real whose pain touches you. Breathe in their suffering, not to rescue them or to imagine yourself superior, but simply to empathize. Allow your heart to become a space capable of holding suffering. Then breathe out, sending them ease and comfort, offering them the same compassion you've learned to offer yourself. Over time, this practice reshapes your perception of the world. You become less afraid of the difficulties within yourself and around you. You stop turning away from people in pain, and you cease judging others for showing their wounds. You understand that their pain is not separate from your own. You recognize the shared thread of human existence, and through that recognition, isolation dissolves. Tonglen disrupts the cycle of emotional avoidance. It teaches you that you don't need to be perfect to offer love, nor do you need to fix your feelings before holding them. You don't need to be free of pain to offer comfort. This allows you to confront self-hatred in a new light. Instead of believing its narratives, you begin to witness the pain that underlies it. You see that self-hatred is often a reaction to wounds left unacknowledged and uncared for, thriving where there has been misunderstanding, a lack of gentleness, and unmet needs. As you meet this hatred with breath and compassion, it begins to lose its power, not because it disappears, but because it's no longer reinforced. Each time you breathe in that old pain and breathe out kindness, you create a new imprint in your heart, an imprint of inclusion, an imprint of care. This doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior, but rather understanding it. When you apply Tonglen inwardly, you don't excuse your past mistakes, but you stop allowing them to define your worth. You see that even harmful actions stemmed from confusion, fear, or pain. You meet this truth with responsibility, yet also with empathy. Tonglen also trains you to stop taking discomfort personally. The tightness, the grief, the anxiety, it's yours, yes, but it's also shared. Millions of others feel it too. When you breathe it in, you breathe in for them as well. When you breathe out, you send relief not only to yourself, but to every being who feels just as you do. This broadens your perspective, connecting you to something larger, reminding you that healing isn't just about self-improvement, it's about dissolving the barriers between your suffering and the suffering of others. This connection isn't abstract. You begin to feel it in your daily life. You feel more patient with those who are overwhelmed, less need to defend yourself when others are reactive, and less shame about your own emotions because you recognize the deeper truth. This is what it means to be human. In practicing Tonglen, you learn to become a vessel, not a container for pain, but a channel for transformation. You allow the breath to carry you, allowing the heart to open, trusting that meeting suffering with compassion will always bring more healing than avoiding it with fear. The beauty of this practice lies in its simplicity. It requires no special tools or perfect conditions, only that you be present, that you breathe, and that you be willing to meet what is difficult with care. You can use this practice at any moment. When anxiety rises, breathe it in gently and breathe out peace. When old shame returns, breathe it in without resistance and breathe out forgiveness. When someone hurts you, breathe in their pain too, not to absorb it, but to soften your own heart, to break the cycle of pain with compassion. This is not a technique for perfect people, but for those willing to remain open amidst what hurts, for those tired of running from themselves, for those ready to see that even the darkest feelings can be met with love. Through Tonglen, self-hatred transforms into the very path to compassion. When you stop pushing pain away, you discover your inherent ability to care, not as a concept, but as a lived truth, a truth that breathes, heals, and requires no earning. The transformation isn't dramatic, but steady, quiet, and real. And in that quiet, a different kind of strength is born, one that doesn't stem from fighting pain, but from embracing it with a heart that no longer turns away. As you consistently meet pain with breath and compassion, your relationship with yourself begins to shift in subtle ways. You no longer run from discomfort, and you question harsh internal narratives. You begin to perceive suffering not as something to reject, but as something to embrace. Yet, even with all this care, one relationship might still feel fractured, the one with your own body. Long after the mind begins to soften, the body can remain a source of shame, frustration, or a profound silence, where deep disconnection often resides. This disconnection doesn't originate with you, but is built upon messages passed down through generations, messages that your body must meet certain standards to be worthy of love, that it must look a certain way to deserve rest, that it must function flawlessly to be respected. These ideas are not rooted in truth, but in conditioning, comparison, and cultural expectations, leading to the forgetting of a vital truth. Your body is not a problem to be solved. It is a sacred ground for awakening. In Buddhist practice, the body is not seen as separate from the spiritual path, but as the very place where we experience awareness, where we feel presence, where we connect with our breath, where we sit in stillness, and where we walk with mindfulness. Each step, each breath, each sensation becomes an integral part of the practice, not in spite of the body, but through it. This understanding transforms everything. When you begin to perceive your body not as an obstacle, but as a gateway, you cease trying to overcome it and stop treating it as a project to fix. Instead, you start listening to it as a teacher. Its aches, its needs, its rhythms are not distractions, but invitations to return to the present moment. Body positivity, from the perspective of Dharma, isn't about forcing yourself to feel beautiful at all times, nor about reaching a constant state of body confidence. It's about seeing clearly, ending the war, and treating your body with the same kindness and honesty that you cultivate with your thoughts. Right view applies here as well. The belief that you are defined by your appearance is a misconception. The belief that your worth depends on your shape, size, or abilities is not aligned with truth. When you grasp this, not just intellectually, but experientially, the grip of judgment begins to loosen. You begin to ask new questions, not "how do I look?" but "how do I feel?" Not "am I acceptable?" but "am I listening?" You begin to respond to your body's messages, not as inconveniences, but as sacred cues. When your body is tired, you allow it to rest. When it is hungry, you feed it without punishment. When it is in pain, you offer it care. This isn't indulgence, it's presence. Loving your body doesn't mean denying its changes or pretending you don't have preferences. It means acknowledging all that it carries and choosing to honor it anyway. This body has held grief, joy, illness, fear, delight, trauma, and recovery. It has carried you through every single moment of your life, and it is still here. To bring mindfulness to the body is to bring reverence to your experience. Every sensation is a doorway. The feeling of your feet on the ground, the rising and falling of your chest, the tension in your shoulders. Each of these moments brings you back to the present. This is why the Buddha began with the body. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first foundation is Kayanupassana, mindfulness of the body, because without connection to the body, practice cannot be grounded. Without inhabiting your body, awareness floats, disconnected from direct experience. The body becomes a place where truth can be known, where impermanence is felt, and where compassion is cultivated. This is not metaphor, this is practice. When you turn towards your body with mindfulness, you begin to notice how much you've ignored or resisted it, how often you've attempted to control it through discipline or neglect, and how often you've viewed it through eyes of comparison rather than care. With that awareness, you can choose differently. You can bring your attention to your skin with kindness, breathe into your belly with respect, and place your hand over your heart, not to fix it, but to say, "I'm here." This relationship develops over time, growing slowly through repeated moments of gentle return. You stop treating your body like a machine and cease demanding silence from your symptoms. You begin to understand that your body has been communicating all along. You simply needed to listen without judgment. This listening includes honoring the ways in which your body differs from others. There is no single form that defines worth, no ideal that determines value. Your body, just as it is right now, holds the full capacity for awakening. You can sit in meditation with pain and meet it with breath. You can walk slowly, feeling each step connect you to the earth. You can eat mindfully, sensing how nourishment supports presence. You can lie down in rest and feel the body soften into trust. There is also room for grief. Grief for the years spent fighting your body. Grief for the shame placed upon you by others. Grief for the parts of yourself you learned to conceal. This grief isn't weakness. It's part of healing. You don't have to rush to acceptance. You only need to begin to stop speaking about your body as an enemy, to stop waiting until it changes to offer it love, and to start viewing it not through the eyes of control, but through the lens of presence. The body is the first home you ever had, and the one you will carry with you until the end of this life. It makes sense to treat it with care, to return to it with reverence, and to remember that this body isn't just yours. It is made of earth, water, heat, and breath. It is nature wearing your name. This perspective dissolves the shame placed on bodies that don't conform to social standards. You begin to see how absurd it is to measure worth by appearance when the body is so clearly a sacred vessel for life itself. You also begin to honor what your body can do, not in terms of achievement, but in terms of support. It allows you to touch, to speak, to connect, to move, to rest, to feel. Even when it is in pain, it is still functioning as your bridge to the world. You can begin to thank it for that, not out of guilt, but out of love. Loving your body through Dharma isn't a destination. It's a practice of remembering, again and again. Every time you get caught in comparison, you return to the breath. Every time you feel shame, you return to presence. Every time you forget that your body is sacred, you return to the simple truth. This body isn't a mistake. It is the ground for awakening. You don't have to feel radiant every day, nor do you have to reject moments of discomfort, but you can choose not to abandon yourself. You can choose to meet your body with the same patience and compassion that you offer your heart and your mind, because your body is not separate. It's not other. It's not less than. It is the path. And each time you remember that, healing deepens, respect returns, and love becomes not something you await, but something you practice through every breath, every movement, every moment of gentle return. The more you return to your body with reverence, the more you discover a steadiness that has always been available, but often overlooked. You realize that presence lives not only in thoughts or beliefs, but in sensation, breath, and rhythm. And with that growing connection, you begin to move through the world with greater care. But even with this groundedness, life still brings waves. Emotions rise, chaos visits, stress builds. Some days, everything feels overwhelming. This is where a deeper kind of strength is needed, one that doesn't fight the storm, but stands calmly within it. This is the quiet power of upekkha, often translated as equanimity. It is the inner balance that remains steady even when the outer world spins. It's not indifference, nor emotional numbness. It's a presence that remains centered even in the face of intensity. Equanimity is the antidote to inner chaos, not because it eliminates emotion, but because it holds it without collapsing. It teaches you how to feel without drowning, how to observe without reacting, and how to remain open without being overwhelmed. This balance becomes essential in a life that is constantly shifting. Emotions aren't a problem, they are part of the human experience. But without equanimity, they can become destabilizing. Joy turns into attachment, fear becomes paralysis, anger becomes harm, and sadness becomes identity. Equanimity doesn't eliminate these feelings, but it changes how you relate to them. As you cultivate equanimity, you begin to notice the space between stimulus and response. You feel anger rising, but you don't immediately act. You sense sadness, but you don't fall into despair. You notice joy, but you don't cling to it for fear of losing it. This gap, this space to witness before reacting, is where your freedom blossoms. Equanimity helps you step out of emotional extremes, holding your experiences with a sense of evenness. You're no longer pulled so far in one direction that you lose sight of your center. You begin to trust that what rises will also pass, and you learn to remain steady in the midst of it all. This steadiness isn't rigid or cold, but warm, grounded, and accepting. It allows you to be fully human while remaining clear. You cry without shame, you feel deeply without apology, but you don't let your emotions define you. You become the space in which they unfold, rather than the emotion itself. This shift is subtle yet transformative. You stop being ruled by inner weather, and you stop chasing only what feels good while resisting what feels bad. You begin to live with greater consistency, not because you don't feel, but because you are no longer thrown off course by what you feel. Cultivating equanimity requires attention. It's not something you can force. It grows through practice, mindfulness, patience, and clear seeing. When caught in a strong emotion, you pause, you breathe, and you name it without judgment. You remind yourself that this moment is not forever, that this feeling is not your identity, and that you have the capacity to hold it. Over time, the nervous system begins to settle. Your body learns that not every wave requires a reaction. Your mind learns that not every thought is urgent. Your heart learns that calm isn't the absence of feeling, but the ability to remain open to it all. Equanimity also transforms self-love, because on days when everything feels messy, when you're anxious, angry, exhausted, or afraid, it becomes the part of you that affirms that even this belongs. You stop needing to feel peaceful in order to be kind to yourself, and you cease waiting for calm to offer care. You begin to love yourself in the midst of the storm. This kind of love is rare. It doesn't depend on conditions, nor does it wait for perfection. It shows up again and again, because that's what genuine love does. Equanimity also enables you to be more present with others. You stop absorbing their chaos and cease feeling the need to fix or control. You become a steady presence, listening without being pulled into every emotional tide. This clarifies your relationships, making them more compassionate and less reactive. You also begin to relinquish the need for everything to go your way. Equanimity helps you accept what you cannot change, not because you've given up, but because you've stopped fighting life. You realize that peace doesn't arise from controlling outcomes, but from meeting each outcome with clarity and balance. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you wise. You still act, you still care, but you don't crumble when things don't unfold as planned. You trust that you can meet life as it is, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. This capacity grows with experience. Each time you remain with a difficult emotion without reacting, you build strength. Each time you sit in discomfort without distraction, you expand your capacity. Each time you choose stillness over urgency, your balance deepens. You begin to appreciate silence, finding stillness as a source of nourishment rather than a void to escape. You find peace in the simple acts of breathing, sitting, and being. Equanimity teaches you that you don't have to chase anything to be okay, and that stability can be found in this very moment, as it is. When life becomes chaotic and everything feels beyond your control, equanimity becomes your anchor, not by making the chaos vanish, but by providing a solid ground on which to stand. You learn to become the eye of the storm, steady, present, and awake. This steadiness doesn't mean you cease feeling, but that you stop identifying so deeply with every feeling. You become spacious, clear, and trustworthy to yourself and to others. Equanimity isn't cold detachment, it's deep inclusion, affirming, I can hold all of this without losing myself. And within that holding, something remarkable unfolds. Your suffering becomes less acute, your joy less fragile, and your love more unconditional. You begin to see that peace isn't found by avoiding life's intensity, but by learning how to remain steady within it. This is what it means to love yourself when you're overwhelmed, not by fixing your emotions, but by holding them with balance, not by controlling every response, but by pausing long enough to choose a wiser one. With equanimity, your heart transforms into a space capable of holding anything, and within that space, your life begins to unfold with greater grace, clarity, and depth than ever before. As equanimity deepens, a new kind of maturity takes root. You no longer react to every rise and fall within you, but respond with steadiness, stemming not from control, but from care. You understand that your experiences are not permanent, and your emotions are not your identity. You begin to move through life with greater grace, not because things have become easier, but because you have become more grounded. And from this groundedness arises the courage to confront what many spend their lives avoiding. There are truths inherent in human existence that are not gentle. They are not meant to be feared, but they are often left unacknowledged. These are the truths of change, loss, aging, and mortality. The Buddha articulated them clearly in what are known as the 5 remembrances. They are not intended to frighten you or induce despair, but are offered as tools to awaken you, to remind you that your life is sacred, not because it lasts forever, but because it doesn't. The 5 remembrances are: I am of the nature to grow old. I am of the nature to become ill. I am of the nature to die. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. My actions are my only true belongings. At first glance, these may feel burdensome, pointing to realities we often strive to avoid. Yet, as you allow them into your awareness, they become anchors, not anchors that weigh you down, but anchors that secure you in the reality of life. To remember that you are of the nature to age is to release the impossible pressure to remain perpetually youthful. It helps you recognize that changes in your body aren't failures, but inherent aspects of the human experience. As you accept aging not as decline, but as a process of deepening, you begin to treat your body with greater respect. You no longer cling to a fixed image of who you think you should be, but care for your body because it sustains you through time, not because it conforms to an ideal. You also stop comparing yourself to younger versions of yourself and acknowledge your growth, recognizing the wisdom gleaned from experience, allowing yourself to age not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, welcoming the signs of a life fully lived. To remember that you are of the nature to become ill isn't to invite sickness, but to cease pretending you are immune to it. It fosters a deeper compassion for your body, particularly during times of difficulty. It encourages you to care for yourself, not just when things are easy, but especially when you feel vulnerable. You begin to listen more attentively, to honor your energy, to respect your limitations, and to soften towards yourself instead of blaming your body when it fails to meet certain expectations. Illness, when approached with mindfulness, becomes a teacher, slowing you down, drawing you inward, and prompting you to care more. It touches you profoundly, reminding you that strength isn't solely defined by relentless productivity. It's about being fully present in each moment. Remembering our mortality isn't morbid but enlightening. It cuts through the superficial, clarifying what truly matters and sharpening your priorities, bringing you back to the present. Understanding the finite nature of life inspires you to live more completely, to voice what needs to be said, listen with deeper attention, and cease waiting for the perfect time to love, rest, speak, or begin. Contemplating death doesn't diminish joy, it amplifies it. Knowing something is impermanent stops you from taking it for granted, prompting you to cherish the smallest details, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of laughter, the quiet rhythm of your breath. You also find yourself releasing resentment more quickly, understanding that time is far too precious to waste on grudges or postponing peace. Remembering that all loved ones and cherished things are subject to change softens your grip, teaching you that love is not about ownership and connection isn't about control. You begin to love more freely, with an open heart and open hands, ceasing to try and fix people in place and allowing relationships to evolve naturally. You become more present in your connections, knowing each interaction could be the last in its current form. This awareness also cultivates reverence for those in your life, appreciating their impermanence, which deepens your appreciation instead of fueling fear. You pause more frequently, forgive more easily, and express gratitude whenever you can. Ultimately, remember that your actions are your only true belongings, not achievements, status, image, or possessions, but how you live, speak, and behave when unobserved. This truth centers you, calling you back to integrity, reminding you that the energy you bring into the world is what endures when all else fades. This remembrance doesn't pressure you to be perfect, but encourages intentional living, free from regret, making your choices meaningful, your words wise, and treating yourself and others with respect. These 5 truths form a foundation for deep self-respect, not a superficial self-esteem, but a profound honoring of your life. When you remember aging, illness, and mortality are inevitable, you stop chasing invincibility and begin to live genuinely and honestly, valuing your time as the precious gift it is. This doesn't make you rigid or somber. Instead, it unlocks a joy rooted in clarity, not denial. You celebrate the simple act of being alive, finding meaning in presence itself, and no longer needing extraordinary experiences. Courage grows as you shed the fear of truth, living more fully in it, taking risks aligned with your heart, and speaking from your soul rather than from fear. You make peace with endings, understanding they are an integral part of every beginning. Self-respect flourishes in this willingness to confront reality, honoring life not for its perfection, but for its fleeting nature, holding yourself with dignity not for avoiding pain, but for facing it. This awareness shapes your decisions. You start asking, is this how I want to spend my time? Is this aligned with what truly matters? Am I living in accordance with my values? These questions aren't burdens but gifts, providing a compass that guides you back to what is essential. The 5 remembrances aren't meant to induce anxiety but to dissolve illusion, helping you awaken and stay grounded in reality. Within that groundedness, you discover a quiet strength, a deep peace, and a steady sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on external validation. You are not here forever, but while you are, you can live a life of depth, choosing love over fear, presence over distraction, and integrity over performance. You can choose to honor your life by living it to the fullest, a choice that begins with remembering, not just once, but repeatedly, again and again, in small moments, in deep breaths, in pauses amid the rush. These remembrances become integral to your inner landscape, helping you face difficulties with openness, meet endings with gratitude, and walk through life with your eyes wide open and your heart more alive than ever. As these 5 remembrances settle into your awareness, a deeper reverence for life begins to grow. You realize your time here is brief, your body ever-changing, your connections fragile yet deeply meaningful. You start moving through the world with greater purpose, softness, and authenticity. But even with this clarity, a new question often arises. How do I care for myself in a world that pulls me in opposite directions? When does self-love turn into overindulgence? When does discipline become self-denial? How do I walk a path that honors my needs without losing balance? This is where the wisdom of the middle way becomes indispensable. The Buddha taught the middle way as the path between extremes, between harsh austerity and excessive pleasure. A teaching not confined to spiritual discipline, it applies to your daily self-care. It is the art of giving yourself enough without excess, practicing kindness without slipping into avoidance, and making true self-love sustainable. Loving yourself wisely means being honest about your needs, not just your immediate wants. What feels good now may cause harm later, while what feels uncomfortable now may lead to healing. The middle way invites you to consider both perspectives, looking beyond impulse to find care that brings long-term nourishment rather than short-term escape. This starts with attention, noticing your patterns. When do you reach for distraction instead of rest? When do you push yourself too hard in the name of productivity? When do you avoid difficult emotions by numbing instead of feeling? These aren't questions meant to shame, but to invite greater intimacy with your own experience. You start asking not just what you feel like doing, but what will truly support you right now. Sometimes the answer is movement, other times stillness. Sometimes it's declining another demand, other times it's showing up even when it's hard. The middle way teaches you to listen, discern, and respond with wisdom instead of reaction. Self-love without balance can lead to neglect, causing you to stop challenging yourself, justify harmful habits, and confuse avoidance with peace. Conversely, self-love without softness can become punishment, leading to impossible standards, self-criticism instead of care, and pushing past your limits, believing rest is weakness. The middle way isn't about neutrality or indifference. It's about staying connected to reality, knowing when to pause and when to act, when to comfort and when to challenge, when to let go and when to hold steady. It requires humility, asking you to drop rigid identities like always being the achiever or always being the healer, and instead be honest about what is needed in each moment. One way to practice this is by observing your inner dialogue. Is your self-care rooted in kindness or fear? Are you treating yourself like a project to fix or a person to care for? Are you using routines to support yourself or to control everything? These questions help you see if your actions align with wisdom or reaction. Balanced self-love also requires boundaries. Saying no isn't neglect but a form of respect. Saying yes to your needs isn't selfish but how you build resilience. Balance means considering the impact of your actions, asking how your care affects others, shapes your life, and whether it's rooted in clarity or compulsion. This middle path includes both structure and fluidity. You may have routines, but you're not rigid, willing to adjust when needed, not attached to perfection in your practice. You understand that rest and discipline aren't opposites. They're both forms of care when used with intention. The middle way helps you navigate moments of uncertainty. When you don't know what to do, it offers space to pause and feel into the next right step. You don't have to rush or have all the answers, simply returning to what is true in this moment. What would be the most loving action right now? Not the easiest, not the hardest, but the most true. This approach also allows for joy without guilt. You don't shame yourself for enjoying life or believe you must suffer to grow. You learn to trust your pleasure when it's rooted in presence, not in escape, and stop dividing your life into what's spiritual and what's indulgent. You begin to see that everything, eating, resting, working, playing, can be sacred when done with awareness. You stop measuring self-love by how much you do or how little you need, instead measuring it by how connected you feel to yourself. Are you listening? Are you responding with care? Are you honoring your truth, even when it's inconvenient? The middle way also helps you stay resilient in the face of change. Life is unpredictable. Needs shift. Circumstances evolve. Balance isn't a fixed position, but a dynamic state. Like walking a tightrope, you're always adjusting. The goal isn't to freeze in perfect posture, but to keep moving with awareness. This path requires gentleness. You won't always get it right. Some days, you may lean too far into comfort. Other days, you may push too hard. The practice isn't about perfect balance, but about returning again and again with honesty and compassion. You begin to trust yourself more deeply, not because you always feel confident, but because you've learned how to listen, stay with yourself even when things are messy, and offer both comfort and structure, both stillness and motion. In this way, the middle way becomes not just a practice, but a relationship with yourself based on respect, not rules, on care, not control, on presence, not performance. A relationship that grows stronger each time you choose balance over extremes. Pause before reacting, and meet yourself not with judgment, but with wisdom. Loving yourself in this way doesn't always feel dramatic. It may look like choosing sleep instead of scrolling, walking away from a habit that no longer serves you, showing up to a commitment because it matters even when it's hard, or taking a break because your body is asking. These small acts of balance create a life that is stable, kind, and whole. The middle way invites you to live in alignment not just with ideals, but with reality, the truth of your changing needs, the truth of your imperfect humanity, and the truth of your deep capacity for both discipline and tenderness. This is how you learn to love yourself, not by swinging between extremes, but by walking the steady, honest, and compassionate path that honors the complexity of your being, step by step, choice by choice, presence by presence. As you walk the middle way, neither forcing nor avoiding, neither denying nor indulging, you begin to see yourself with more clarity. You hold space for both strength and softness, learning to care without clinging, to rest without guilt, and to act with integrity instead of impulse. But even as balance begins to shape your choices, there may still be something that lingers quietly beneath it all. The weight of your past, the moments you wish you could take back, the versions of yourself you now see differently, the harm you may have caused when you were unaware, afraid, or in pain. And here, the practice of self-love meets one of its greatest challenges, the work of forgiveness. Forgiving yourself isn't about forgetting, erasing history, or pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness is the process of releasing your identity from being frozen in your worst moments. It's the choice to stop endlessly punishing yourself for who you were when you didn't yet know what you know now. And this is where the Buddhist understanding of karma offers a vital shift in perspective. Karma is often misunderstood as a cosmic punishment system, fate, or a verdict passed down by the universe. In its truest form, karma means action. It's the natural law of cause and effect, where every action creates a ripple, every choice leaves an imprint. But karma isn't fixed. It's fluid, moving and changing with you. This understanding matters deeply when it comes to self-forgiveness. If karma were permanent, you would be stuck, with no room to grow, repair, or heal. But karma responds to what you do now. It doesn't freeze you in place. It gives you a way forward, allowing transformation not through denial, but through intentional action. Forgiving yourself through the lens of karma means recognizing that while past actions have consequences, they don't define your future. It means acknowledging the harm you may have caused, but also choosing to meet that recognition with responsibility rather than shame. Shame keeps you stuck, while responsibility opens the door to redemption. When you see that karma responds to present action, you realize every moment is a turning point. What you do now matters more than what you did then, because now you can choose with awareness, act with compassion, and plant different seeds. This doesn't undo the past, but it changes how you carry it, shifting your focus from guilt to growth. You begin to ask, what can I learn? What can I offer? How can I live differently now to honor the truth I've discovered? Self-forgiveness is an act of love grounded in clarity. It's not about making excuses, but about refusing to keep your heart in chains. It's the recognition that you cannot heal through self-punishment. Healing comes through presence, care, and the choice to live with intention from this point forward. Understanding karma in this way also helps you stop identifying with your mistakes. You are not your past actions, but the awareness that sees them. You are the one growing, choosing differently, and willing to change. This shift is powerful because it gives you back your agency, saying you are not broken, but responsible. And being responsible is not a burden, but a gift. The process of self-forgiveness begins with honesty. You acknowledge the impact of your actions without minimizing or deflecting. You see the harm clearly, but meet that clarity with compassion. You understand that the self who caused harm was shaped by conditions, ignorance, fear, trauma, and pain. And you also understand that the self who sees that truth now is capable of doing better. This dual awareness of past harm and present wisdom is what makes forgiveness possible. Without awareness, change cannot happen. Without compassion, healing cannot unfold. But when the two come together, karma begins to move differently. The energy you put into the world starts to reflect your growth rather than your pain. You also begin to act differently, not to erase the past, but to transform your relationship with it. You offer apologies where possible, show up more fully, and stop repeating the same cycles. You build trust with yourself by living in alignment with your values. These actions, over time, begin to soften the weight of your regrets. Forgiveness is not a switch, but a path. Some days it feels easy. Other days, old guilt resurfaces. That is part of the process. What matters is that you keep walking, keep choosing compassion, and keep remembering that karma is dynamic. Every kind word, honest action, and loving choice rewrites the path ahead. This understanding also helps you see others more clearly. When you know karma is fluid, you stop reducing people to their worst moments and holding them in fixed judgments. You begin to allow the possibility that they too can grow, just as you have. This softens your relationships, brings more empathy into your world, and strengthens your ability to offer forgiveness not just inwardly, but outwardly. Through this lens, your journey becomes one of alignment. You live in a way that reflects who you are becoming, not who you were. You stop defining yourself by old stories and start writing new ones, not to cover up the past, but to honor the truth you've found through it. The freedom that comes with self-forgiveness is not light or superficial, but deep and grounded. It comes from knowing your past shaped you, but does not have to confine you. It comes from realizing what you do next is what matters most. You stop running from what happened, stop hiding, and begin to carry your story with integrity. You share it where it can help, learn from it where it can teach, and offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a friend. Forgiving yourself also means honoring your humanity, recognizing that mistakes are part of being alive, and that imperfection is not a flaw in your design but part of your path. You stop holding yourself to impossible standards and begin to offer kindness without needing to earn it. This shift creates space for new action, deeper love, and a future that is not a reflection of your past, but a reflection of your presence. You learn to sit with yourself again, not as someone to correct, but as someone to care for. You become less afraid of what you've done because you've learned how to meet it with truth. You become more willing to keep showing up for your life because you trust that your presence matters. In this way, karma becomes not a burden but a path of redemption. It reminds you that nothing is set in stone, that your actions carry weight, but so does your awareness. That healing is not found in guilt, but in conscious, loving choice. Self-forgiveness is how you reclaim your voice, rebuild trust with yourself, and allow love to reach places in you that have long been abandoned. And in every breath, every choice, every step forward, you are rewriting what karma means, not as punishment, but as transformation, not as history, but as possibility, not as something to fear, but as a reminder that you always have the power to begin again. You've just taken a journey through the heart of the Dharma, one breath, one truth, and one act of self-love at a time. From understanding your mind's habits to forgiving your past, from sitting in noble silence to embracing your changing body, you've seen that self-love in Buddhism isn't about pampering or praise, but about presence. It's about choosing compassion when it's hardest, and realizing you're not broken, you're becoming. You've learned that real love begins when you stop running from yourself, when you breathe into suffering instead of avoiding it, and when you stop clinging to who you were and start honoring who you are. You've seen that your value isn't in perfection, but in your willingness to stay present even when it's uncomfortable. And through every lesson, whether it was emptiness, equanimity, karma, or impermanence, you've been reminded that you are not alone. You are part of something vast, wise, and deeply alive. So before you drift off into rest, Leave a comment below. What truth touched you the most tonight? Was it something you already knew but forgot, or something new that softened your heart? Write it down. Let others see your insight. Your words might be what someone else needs to heal. If this brought you peace or even just one quiet moment of stillness, consider subscribing to the channel. There's more to explore, more to heal, and more space for you, just as you are. Until next time, breathe gently, rest fully, and love deeply. You're already on the path.